Welcome to Rogue Bogues. This is episode 30. After a big week of NBA Finals, we are once again joined by Pro and had a lot of good feedback, Pro, from our old friend Andrew Gaze.
What did he say without me in the room?
I think he balanced out not swearing once on the show with you, so it got a lot of good feedback for everyone out there that listened. You can catch that. That was episode 29. We did an Olympic preview with Andrew Gaze, but it's safe to say I think the first 30-40 minutes he was in a bit of shock.
Yeah, so was my wife in our marriage, so she's still shocked. It's fucking 10 years later. But yeah, I get you. That was one of the funnest couple of hours that I've had in basketball in a long time. I mean, he was first of all, unbelievable guy with great stories and great insight. But, I mean, he could take a fucking joke and a pounding swear-wise. So, congrats to him.
Yeah, and he's one of the best storytellers out there. He gets very animated. His eyes light up when he's telling these Olympic stories. So he's always an entertainer as much as he is an athlete, and that's why he's on TV a lot here in Australia and does a lot of good media work. But the NBA Finals, congratulations to the Milwaukee Bucks. Absolutely sensational run they had. There's a lot to talk about, which we'll get to, but you got to congratulate the Milwaukee Bucks for everything they've done. They've come out as winners. The celebrations were awesome. Giannis was awesome. But we'll talk about the games. Game 5 and 6 for me were just such typical NBA Finals games, like massive swings. Milwaukee were up big in Game 5. Phoenix came back, and then it was the reverse. Sorry, it was the reverse. Milwaukee were up big, and then Phoenix came back, and it reversed in Game 6. But just swings back and forth, jabs, a few haymakers, and then they get back on their feet. And it was just a really good. I think Game 5 and 6 were really fun to watch as far as the drama and the intrigue of what an NBA Finals should be. How did you find those two games?
Bogues, just typical NBA, like you said. Like, I think that if you're going to be successful in the league or at any level, actually, you get punched in the mouth early. Don't, as a coach, as a player, as a spectator, don't, sort of go nuts. Settle down, settle into the game, get easy looks like you've been getting all season, and then get back in the game. The game's so fast. And so, with the pace of the game, with the threes and the pace that they play, that no lead is really safe. You could be down 20 and that thing could evaporate, pretty quickly. But I think, like you said, there was a lot of jabs, and then teams stayed in it. They fought back, and then, one team just didn't have enough at the end. And it was a good finals. The last game especially, it didn't start out great in Game 6, but then, probably the last 2.5 quarters or so was very entertaining to watch. It was great.
Yeah, great. I thought it was great finish by Milwaukee, obviously, to get the win. But, most of these games in this final series, most teams were in it with 3 or 4 minutes left. So that's always good to see. Historically, there's usually a few blowouts in a series. Phoenix just capitulated. Up 2-0, the world was kind of bowing to their feet like they'd already won it. And that was kind of the interesting thing I found reading, and we always talk about it. You can never get too high and too low, and when you're high, everyone's going to tell you the best, and when you're low, they're going to tell you suck. I don't know if they bought into it, but it was completely different. Once they got punched in the mouth in Milwaukee, they just didn't look the same, and there was some fatigue that set in. We actually probably got one right and talked about the Chris Paul effect and what Drew Holiday picking up full court and annoying and grabbing and everything legal, just physical, great all-league defender, probably wore CP3 down, but Giannis for this series. He just kept rising to another level. We forget that this guy's knee was basically, facing backwards at one point in this playoff run against Atlanta. I thought when he did his knee, he was done. So the fact that he even came back, he was clearly struggling the first couple of games, and we spoke about it. The Euro wasn't in his game. He wasn't as comfortable off one foot, which is fair enough. His knee probably just didn't want to take that load on one leg. But as the series went on, he got better and better. Whatever drugs they gave him, whatever they put in his drink, it worked. But he was just phenomenal. Finishes the game 6 with a 50 piece. And Pro, for me, he's I don't know him, and I hope I'm not I'm not fooled by this, but from everyone I talk to, he is the most likable superstar I've seen in the NBA for, a number of years, if not ever. I love the way he goes about it. I love his attitude. He's always smiling. He admits when he has bad games. He's kind of honest in his presses. You would have loved that he dropped some F-bombs in those press conferences, and I guess you let it slide because you won a championship. But, I mean, have you seen a more likable superstar MVP championship winner than Giannis?
I've never. I can't even say Michael Jordan because plenty of people didn't like him. But when I was in Greece, Bogues, during the playoffs and early finals, actually, about half the people you have deep conversations about the kid, especially in his neighborhood. I probably talked to about 30, 40 coaches and players and people that grew up in the neighborhood. Probably almost half of them had tears in their eyes by the time they're done with it because they were so happy for the kid. Everybody loves him. There's so many Greece jerseys with Antetokounmpo in the back, and it was fantastic. I mean, you talk about they just light up when they talk about the kid. And anybody who worked with them or spent any time with the kid, they go nuts about him. And you could just see it. He is a great kid. Look, he's a flawed. He's not perfect as a basketball player like anybody else. He's got his flaws, but I think he proved that he doesn't care that his shooting is a little bit, not the greatest. He's like, you know what? This is my game, and I'm going to dominate what I do. And I don't care. I'm not gonna let it fester that I'm not Larry Bird shooting the ball or Ray Allen. I don't care. I'm gonna go. I'm gonna play my game. I'm gonna play hard. I'm gonna carry the team on my back, and then we'll see what happens. He's a fantastic kid and a great player. So I'm happy for them. I'm happy for the team. Happy for Bud. Just because all these things that have been said most of the year when they weren't playing great at times. That I'm glad they stuck together and played very well and won themselves a championship. It's great to see, man.
It is. We'll touching on Bud, we're going to touch on him a little bit later, but we might as well get to it now. Do you believe he's fired if it wasn't for a Kevin Durant size 19 shoe?
That fucking size, that size with that Durant shoe is unbelievable. It carries more weight than I do sometimes. Let's be honest, it doesn't. No, probably not. I mean, you know how it is in the NBA, Bogues. Especially when the media starts killing it and they start talking about it every day. He probably wasn't, which isn't really fair, but that's just the expectation of the league. He probably wasn't coming back. I would say 95% chance he was gone. I would say Rick Carlisle would be the next coach of the Milwaukee Bucks if they lost that series. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. And that's the unfortunate reality of the NBA and the media. And he just had a bad rap, Bud just can't get him over the line. Well, it's players are playing that as well. And it's just so cool to see him now. He's forever a champion in the city of Milwaukee. He's going to be a legend there for life, along with Giannis and the rest of that squad. But yeah, it's just interesting how, those sliding door moments in people's careers, whether you're a coach or a GM. And there's that Popovich story that I've probably mentioned this on the podcast before, but Steve Kerr mentioned this story to us that in that lockout year, I think it was 99-2000, the Spurs didn't start off that well in that season, apparently. I can't have to look back and I can't give you the exact numbers, but the story goes something like this. They were on a losing streak of some sort, or they were up and down, and it was a Saturday or a Sunday game, and Steve says he got a call from his agent saying, when you guys lose this weekend, they're going to fire Pop on Monday. And he thought, okay, cool, whatever. He was pretty new to that team. He moved on from the Bulls. Kind of, it is what it is. And then so they win on the Saturday or the Sunday. And, as we know, there's a lot of teams that don't like firing a coach after a win, right? They like to really double down after a loss and pat themselves on the back. See, we just lost again, so we're firing our coach. It's just the way it is. You ever rarely see a coach fired after a win. So they win on the Saturday or the Sunday. They go on to win 10 or 11 straight, right? And they don't fire Pop because then it's basically mid-season. That was the lockout year, remember? So it wasn't 82 games. So they're already 2/3 through the season. They make a run and they win a championship. And you look at where Pop is today and what he's done, and he's been there now since 20, 25 years. they're the sliding door moments. Now that was from a pretty good source in Steve Kerr, and he's told that story to many people, and it's just crazy how small that room for error is at times, and Bud conquered that small room for error by winning the championship. So I think it's a really, really good story.
Yeah, as an organization, Bogues, you gotta have some fucking balls. You gotta close your fucking ears. Stop fucking reading. If you're an owner, stop reading Twitter in the middle of the fucking night what these fucking talking heads are talking about and saying, right? If your coach is good, and you feel as though that he's putting in a day's work, your players like him, you've got talent, you've got to really evaluate your team. Are you really good enough to win a championship? Were you healthy? Is this coach prepared? Like I said, player relationships. And are you putting the best product on the floor that you can for this coach to evaluate if you're going to fire him or not? I don't care if Stephen A. Smith says to fire him. As Kendrick Perkins says to fucking fire him. Who gives a fuck what they think? You got to really self-evaluate the best you can. Like I said, I think Terry Stotts in Portland, that's an example. Like, he should have never got fired. That team had no fucking chance. None. And their players liked the guy. And you fired him because why? Because you think you're a championship fucking team? Yeah, I think I should be weighing 175, but that shit ain't happening either. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, you got to just self-evaluate. And then if they're underachieving, if their players hate the fucking guy, if he's just a bad dude, then yeah, I'd fire him for those things. But don't fire him for just to fire him. I think Bud's a good coach. Look, I told you all the time, I think coaching is very overrated in this league. I think you have talent, and then the coaches are great for adjustments and keeping you organized, no doubt, keeping everything afloat a little bit. But their ATOs aren't better than, the number one coach in the league isn't fucking that much better than the number 18 coach with ATOs in the offense and defense that they run. I'll tell you what, the number one team in the league, that coach has a lot more fucking talent than the number 18 team. But when, in the playoffs, adjustments and things like that and how you could bounce back, that's what you pay for. But I think Bud, regardless of what happened, if he lost that Brooklyn series, I wouldn't have fired the guy. I give a fuck less if he won a championship or not. I think he's a good coach, unless your team is revolting against the guy. I don't see that. What do you see, Bogues?
Oh, the blame game is a big part of the NBA, and it's, as we've discussed in numerous podcasts, it's who's got the owner's ear and who's got the GM's ear. They're the two. The GM's are an important one as well, but the owners be all and end all. So, if someone that the owner trusts is in his ear saying, this guy just can't get us over the line, he just can't do it, he blah, 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 then that puts a negative kind of picture of that coach. And then as an owner or a GM, you're hearing that from people you trust, then you're looking for any small failure during the season or playoffs. Oh, yeah, they're right. There it is again, So it's just one of those hard things in the NBA and professional sports. It's like you said, who is the owner listening to? Who is the GM listening to? They're listening to social media, listen to regular media, all that kind of stuff. And I think it can kind of create an avalanche effect on an owner or GM to react and just do something because they're supposed to do something. And that's what you never want to be in that position. As you said, if your players are developing and you're getting better, your team's getting better, it's a good culture, it's a good workplace environment to come in. Guys like coming to practice, they like lifting weights, they like being around the group. You've probably ticked most boxes as a head coach if you've got all that right. Because that's sometimes, as we know, that's a challenge in itself. Like, you could have the most talented roster, but you don't get that right, you're not doing shit. And it looks like Milwaukee, if we said at the start of the season, Milwaukee's going to win a championship, you'd probably say, their roster's probably they just don't have enough on that roster. So in my opinion, they've overachieved. When you look at the Brooklyns of the world, even Miami gave them fits last season. So for them to come and win a championship, they were in the mix, but you definitely wouldn't have them as number one. I think it's great, and I think it's a credit to the coaching staff, everyone involved there, the organization, by investing in their guys. And look, they need some luck too along the way. Brooklyn had some injuries, but then Milwaukee had some injuries, and they continue to punch. And let's not forget, they beat Atlanta without the MVP and their best player. They came out and made some great adjustments in that series. All right, Trae Young was banged up as well, but he was on the floor, and they still won that series. So they did a lot of things great, and you love to see it. But that's the way the NBA is. It just if you're not winning the championship, there's probably realistically another 2 or 3 or 4 rosters that had a genuine chance. And if you're outside of those, like a Portland, and you're just like, it's our coach's fault, there's a bit of delusion there. At times, there is a time time for a refresh if a coach has been there 10, 15 years and it's just the voice is getting old. Probably Carlisle-ish, where it's like time to move on for all parties. I get that. But as far as a team like Portland's a good example, it's like, well, you probably need to address your roster before you address the coach and actually give him a bit more kind of consistency on that roster, and then see how he goes. Maybe bring some defenders in and a bit more physicality, and then give it a year or two, and then it's like, okay, we're going to move on. But I just think it's just a reactionary league, and the media has a big part to play in it. But that's how that goes with coaching. What do you think about Giannis's comments around the super team? I think they were great. I think it was kind of a backhanded slap to all the super teams out there. For those that don't know, Giannis's press conference after the game, which had a lot of gold. I mean, every player that gives press conferences after a championship, the guard's down. There's a lot more truth in those press conferences. And Giannis basically just came out and said, I could have joined a super team, but I wanted to win a championship in Milwaukee, wanted to do it the right way, and just kind of mockingly laughed that he could have joined a super team and won it the easy way, where he took a lesser role. So I kind of enjoyed it, and I hope this now is the trend. I don't think it's going to be pro. Let's be honest, but when you look at what the Warriors did when I was there, and that started a trend of small ball and death lineups, it started a bit of a trend to win a championship. I wonder if this will somewhat keep some of these homegrown stars to be like, you know what, I can be the man of my team and try to do it. I agree with Giannis. It's worth so much more doing it that way. People will say a chip is a chip, so be it. But if you're Giannis, you're the number one guy. You were on a team. Giannis was on a team that was 15-67 pro in 2013-14. Giannis and Middleton were on that team. They were 15-67. Fast forward 8 odd years, and they've won an NBA championship. That you can't change that grind of what it took to get there. But going and joining a super team, you still win a championship and you tick that box. But I don't think it's as fulfilling as what he just went through in the grind, pro.
Yeah, especially in today's society, in the NBA and in pro sports, it's such a copycat society, right? First, nobody really did many of the super team stuff. Then Miami did it, won it, and then everybody sort of tried to do it. Oh, we got to do this, we got to do that. And now Giannis winning it. I think there'll be a little bit of a copycat trend for a couple of guys, but I think that most players, not all, but most players like to take the path of least resistance. Why not I just join up a super team? And it's that much easier. There's not a lot of players that really want to get punched in the mouth every year, especially early on in their team's development, and stick around for it. They want to point fingers at the first thing. First, they'll get the coach fired, then they'll get the GM fired, and then they get their agent fired, and then they're like all right, getting the fuck out of here. It's there aren't a lot of like Dame Lillards out there. There's not a lot of guys that not hunting for the door right after the season if they don't win it year in and year out. But that's just the league. I think it's great what he dealt with, what Giannis dealt with. I mean, he really sort of took the hits early in his career. I think early in his career he struggled a little bit, and then his second, third year, obviously, he really made a big jump in his development. And they started adding pieces. They had Middleton, and they have a few pieces here and there, and it was a little bit of a revolving door. Then they finally got like Lopez, and they did the Holiday deal, and Pat Connaughton was a big boost to them. So they started, having these draft picks that sort of did pretty well for them. So it is what it is. I can't fault somebody for wanting to join a super team. If that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do. If you want to stay with your team, that's what you do too. You're your own man in this league. You make enough money and have enough stature to do that. I think it's awesome for him to do it in a small market. He could have left. He could have went to LA, Miami, all these places. He decided to stay. He decided to say, you know what, I'm going to do it in here. And now he might be one of the most popular people ever to live in that state. And he's just getting started. And they have the whole team back, and they could run it back. They might be able to do the same thing next year. Who knows? Maybe not. But I definitely applaud what he did. He stuck through it. That city's great. It's a great deal as far as a small market that 8 years ago was a joke, and now they're on top. It's a pretty cool achievement.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, this isn't a knock for anyone joining a super team. I think the ring's a ring. I just think it's more fulfilling to go through those shitty years and those those ups and downs, and we almost got there and then we didn't, and then he wins the MVP that year and they get bounced by a Miami team that, or the following year he gets bounced by a Miami team that, probably shouldn't have been in a series, had to go through the fire. That's what I think. I just think it's so much. I was part of one of those in Golden State where we had to go through the fire. It was a full rebuild. I got there. It was a dismal culture, dismal organization. It was a shit show kind of, there was a lot of revolving parts, and then new owners came on board, new GM, new coach. And it was fulfilling to be part of that grind of the ups and downs and the naysayers to then a championship. And I think Giannis, that's more the point around the super teams. He did it the hardest way possible in a city that can't recruit first-tier free agents ever. I mean, they can't even get meetings with first-tier free agents like an Anthony Davis or whoever it is. They're not even taking that phone call. They're like, Milwaukee who? Do they even play in our league? It's kind of that attitude for everyone out there with first-tier free agents. So for him to do that, stay there, push all these chips to the table and win it, it's great. A few other tidbits. Drew Holiday copped a lot of shit early on in the playoffs, mid-playoffs, and even early on in the finals at times, and copped a lot of shit, but just kept doing what he does. He's a grinder, great defender. Made some big shots for him in that series. Phoenix made numerous runs in Game 5 and 6, and he was the guy that actually made the big plays. The infamous steal late in the game from Devin Booker, alley-oop to Giannis. He hit a couple of big, made a steal one game and dribbled up and popped a three, so he was huge. He had his paw prints all over that series, in my opinion. Middleton was huge as well. I mean, they've got a big three that's formed naturally in itself, but Drew Holiday to me was really instrumental, and just him kind of not letting all that bullshit kind of get to him in his game and just kept doing what he does. Didn't try to, a lot of players that face criticism and aren't playing as well might try and go into a game and press and try to do too much, which then backfires even more. He didn't. It just looked like he was even keel every game, steady, knew his talents and what his role was, and was fantastic in that series, I think, even with some of the bad stat line nights.
Yeah, he was. And it was a great move by him by just to sort of, like we always say, don't get too high, don't get too low. You sort of just keep at it. You keep your routine going, and your daily routine. You just play hard. Just let the game come to you, and do what you do. He's a seasoned veteran. He's been through this before. You're going to go through highs and lows in series, and I think the players that are mentally weak, they let it get to them. They stop being aggressive. They stop looking for their shot. They stop looking to do the things that they usually do every day because they're too embarrassed and too, I want to say, gutless to make a mistake. This game is filled with mistakes. This game's filled with bad games. It just is what it is. And he stayed with it. He stayed hungry. He stayed, gave Phoenix fits, CP. He did his thing, and he finally overcame it and played really well down the stretch when they needed him. So I think that it's just sort of an example to anybody. So who gives a fuck if you have a bad first couple of games of a series? Dig in. Don't change everything up, because that's what most people like to do. Don't change anything up. Just keep your routine. Look, he's been an all-star. He's one of the better guards in the league in the last decade or so. That is what it is. You just got to keep playing hard and keep playing through it. And it's good that he just stayed with it. He's a seasoned pro, seasoned vet. People like him. He's a hard-nosed kid. I'm happy for the kid that he's stuck in, and he didn't go nuts like most players would.
Yeah, and then following that, Portis, I caught some of his comments, which I found inspirational in a way, because he basically made some comments around what it means to be a role player. So, when he was on numerous other teams, at times he's been a number 2, number 3 option, a young star at times from when he got drafted. But he just spoke about how he accepted the fact that he was a role player, and he really learned this season in general of how to play off guys and not be the number 1, 2, 3 guy, and find ways to find buckets by crashing the offensive board, spacing for threes, making the right spacing read at times, being active, taking his shot when he gets it. But he mentioned, look, on other teams, I'm getting 9, 10, 11, 12 field goal attempts. I don't know I'm going to get them every night. On this team, it was, closer to 5, 6, 7. And I accepted that and tried to figure out ways on how to best myself doing that and playing off Giannis and Drew and Middleton. And I thought it was a really got a good press conference for people out there that aren't, there's only one star of the team, and there's usually only another 2 or 3 mid-stars, like a Middleton and a Drew to Giannis. If you're not one of those guys, how do you play? How do you fit in? How do you get court time? And for young kids in high school, young kids in junior basketball in Australia, college, whatever it is, right? There's a role there if you're willing to accept it. Everyone was the man. When you become a professional athlete in whatever, whatever team sport, everyone was the man as a junior in high school on their team because you wouldn't be a pro otherwise, right? So it's hard to then adjust to like, hey, I was getting all the touches in college and high school. Now they're asking me to just be a defender or a 3-and-D guy or an offensive rebounder. But, it's hard as a young fella to accept that. But it seems like he's accepted that at an early age and he's got a championship for it. And he'll be lauded eventually, by some teams. Like you always say, you get overpaid off a championship team because he's now bought in and has that culture and understands what it takes. And I thought they were really cool comments.
Bogues, this league is filled with players, man. Past about player 100, it doesn't fucking matter. 1 to 6 really fucking matter. 7 to 30 matter a lot. 31 to 99, very much needed for teams. 100 on, they don't give a fuck. Bobby Portis, Johnny Portis, El Ray Portis, Gianna Portis, and you name it. Doesn't matter. So if you're going to come in with the attitude, look, he was a first-round pick. He was a hell of a player at Arkansas, hell of a player in high school, highly, highly touted. Then he comes into the NBA. It doesn't really work for him that well right away. Plays an okay role in Chicago. Then he goes to Washington. Then he goes to New York. Most players in this league, it doesn't they start blaming everybody else. We talk about it all the time. I was the man in college. Well, it ain't the fucking man anymore. I've had countless conversations in Dallas, in these roles and talking to players look, this ain't college anymore. You got 3 other guys you got to play off of. You got to be in that fucking corner. You got to fucking play hard defensively. You got to know our playbook. You got to be a fucking pro. And you got to figure out how to play without that fucking ball in your hand. Because if you don't, I guarantee it. I say, look, you know what? I'll leave at your table tomorrow. I'll leave it in your locker. 200 fucking euros and a fucking case of Rosetta Stone, the Czechoslovakian fucking series. Because that's where the fuck you're going to be. Because 60 more players are going to get drafted. And they're gonna forget about you or easily. You'll go to another team. They're not gonna be invested in you. They're not gonna care if you make it or not because they got out their players that they drafted and they signed in free agency. You're just a throw-in, and then you're gonna wash out of this fucking league. And Portis figured out. Bobby figured out. Look, I'm not that guy, but you know what? If I play consistent, if I play hard. When my number gets called, there's 82 games plus playoffs. There's going to be times where they're going to have to call my number because Giannis is off. Lopez can't get it going. Middleton's hurt. They're going to need me to perform. And that's what people got to understand in this league. Past 100, they don't give a fuck about you. They do, but they don't. They could rearrange it. They could sign this guy or that guy or this guy. There's plenty of players in free agency for $5 million, $8 million, $7 million, mid-level exception they can get. So you could either point fingers, oh, it's everybody else's fault, or you can look yourself in the mirror, talk to your coach and say, Coach, what do I need to get on the floor? What do I need to do? Because I'm going to get on the floor. I want to help us win. I want to either sign with us long-term or go to another place where they'll value me a little bit more and I could do a little bit more. But that's the problem, Bogues, because everybody that comes into the league is usually the LeBron James of their high school team or their college team, and everyone's telling them how great they are. And nobody really sits them down and says, hey, look, bud, that was college. I always say, do you know who the prom queen was in your high school? Because no. I go, yeah, no shit. Nobody fucking remembers. That was 7 years ago, 6 years ago. People forget real quick in this league. And I'm glad he rebounded. He's a hell of a kid. He plays hard. He's tough. And I'm glad that he's figuring it out. And he's probably going to get paid a lot of money somewhere else. And they're going to have to make a decision if they keep him or let him go. They're probably going to keep him. They love him in that town. But now he's figured it out. And they'll probably give him a little bit more of a role next year. And he can gradually move it up. He's only 25 years old. It ain't like he's 35. He's got years left and he could continue to develop.
No doubt. And a similar example I had is I played many years ago with a team that we had a call up from the G League, and he was, not going to name who it was, but he was a kid that was top 3 leading scorer in the G League every year. And he got a call up, and he had a conversation with me, and he just, why can't I fit? And I'm like, to be honest, man, most NBA teams don't need a G League leading scorer on a call up, right? They need generally the guys that get called up are guys that rebound really well, block shots, hit the open three. They play a role really well. They generally don't need a guy to come in and drop 30 for him. And this kid just couldn't get his head around, I'm a bucket. I can get buckets here as well. And I'm like, well, we don't need buckets from you because we have 5 other guys who are great scorers, you know? So like you said, it was just hard to sell to this kid, like, listen, man, pick up full court, knock down the open three. When they call on you to do some ball handling duties, don't turn it over, get us in our shit, get us in our sets, and you'll find a role. But he felt like, oh no, I can show more than that. I'm like, yeah, but we don't need you to show more than that. That's, you know, so, and that's, you see that a lot from the G League, because then some of these G League guys are like, how did he get a call up? I'm better than him, I'm more talented. I'm like, yeah, you definitely are, but he's okay being a screener and a guy that just offensive rebounds, or a guy that just takes charges, or a guy that's a lockdown defender. And that's the difference with a lot of, like you said, once you get outside of that top 40, 50 players in the NBA, you're very easily replaceable. You're a pawn in the chess game, whereas those top 50 are the big dog pieces. So Portis is a prime example of that.
Yeah. I remember a kid we had, Bogues. We brought him up for the D League. Nice kid. I mean, really good kid, played hard. And I'm working him out before, you know, we were really bad in Dallas. So like he was putting up some numbers, you know, for us, because we were just sort of, you know, trying to get a draft pick. So he's working on his like ISO stuff. And I go to him, I said, dude, what are you doing? I said, you need to work on space on the floor, straight line drive, one dribble pull up. That's what you need to be working on. He goes, I'm an ISO guy. I said, you're not an ISO guy. He goes, I will agree to disagree, but you're wrong. I said to myself, motherfucker, we're going to start seeing you on the Taiwanese game of the week in about a month from now. What are you doing? And that's what he did. He ended up playing, and, you know, he's probably trying to figure out how he's going to spend his $20 a day meal money in the D League, and, you know, checking into the Best Western as we speak, because of the fact that he doesn't have it tunnel vision. Like, I just got to do this one thing and I can get $2.8 million a year and be in the best league in the world. Instead of like, no, I'm an ISO guy, because of that ego. That ego fucking kills it. I'm glad. I'll get off the point, but, you know, like you said, like a lot of players can't understand. I'd say about close to half the players in the league, Bogues, because of their ego, and usually it's like from 7 to 13 best player in the team. Because of ego, they probably cost themselves 3 less years in the league, because of the fact that they don't want to fucking buy into being a role player pro, you know, and they think that they need more touches and more, you know, they think that they're an all-star when they just got to be a role player and they can't handle it. And that's what happens. It ends up fucking up their careers. I'm glad he's back on track, man. That's great.
Yep, no doubt. And then just finishing on Milwaukee before we get to Phoenix for a little bit, I felt like Giannis made some pretty pointed comments at you, Pro, during his press conference. I think some sub comments to Pro. He said, people say I can't make free throws. Well, I made 17 for 19 tonight. I made my free throws, Pro. So I know we've both been on him. Me not as much, because I can't be a hypocrite because I didn't make a lot, but you definitely were at numerous points throughout the season. And he, you know, game 6, balls on the line, championship on the line. The kid did not look like he was going to miss a free throw. It was actually quite an amazing, mental adjustment he made that game.
First of all, he's right. That game, he was mock fucking Price. I mean, he was big time. He slowed it down. He phased everything out, and he did what he needed to do. He's still not a good free throw shooter, and it still could be an issue. I'm not going to take anything away from the kid. He's a champion. He's got balls as big as my fucking stomach, and he's unbelievable as far as what he did in that series and carrying that team to the championship at times. And 17 for 19. The kid was ridiculous. It was the ultimate big time Hall of Fame move that he did, as no question. But he still can't make free throws. But on a long term thing, he definitely needs to address it. But you know what? He's right. That game, he was unbelievable at it. Actually, you know, in the last half of that series, he was pretty damn good. And like I said, between him and Simmons, he doesn't mind being there, regardless if he makes them or not, where Simmons is afraid to be there. It's a big difference.
Big difference,
yeah.
You
know, so, yeah, no, he definitely made a statement, Bogues, for sure.
Just real quick, because you know, there's obviously a lot of clips coming out about Giannis and old interviews and whatnot, and they showed a game, one of his breakout games his rookie year, was against the then Brooklyn Nets with KG and all that, and his jumper was smooth back then. Like, I don't know
Yep,
if you've seen clips back then, but his free throw was smooth. He was shooting three balls like in rhythm, and it looked much better than it does now. His confidence hasn't wavered. That's the most important thing, as you just said. But man, his jumper back then was really, really different. I don't know where kind of that hitch of his came from, but yeah, man, it's
I've heard. Yeah, unfortunately, we've been around it like this. Somebody from the coaching staff made him change it, and that was it. I don't know who it was. I don't know why it was done. If you look at it, it was pretty smooth. It was fine. He shot like, I want to say he shot like 34%. Yeah, Giannis shot rookie season from the three. He shot 34.7% from the three. Yeah, so he was on target to be a 38, 39% three-point shooter. It was going to take him some time, but they totally gutted his shot. And what it did was, we talked about this in length. I'm not going to go too far into it, but the difference, Bogues, here is his head shoots back. It shoots back, and it's the heaviest part of your body. And it's like shooting at a moving target now. When your head goes back, it's a death sentence for a shooter. And now he's made some strides with that for sure. But that was the biggest problem. He's got a couple other problems, like his guide hand is sort of like on top of the ball instead of on the side. I mean, there's a million things. Not a million, but there's a couple of things. But yeah, I mean, that's what happens when you, instead of saying, you know what, let's make a tweak here and there, but we're good, Giannis. My two questions I always ask a shooter, Bogues. Are you comfortable? And are you comfortable with the shot? And are you confident that the ball is going to go in? And I know you're struggling right now, but are you confident when you shoot the ball? And if they say yes to both, then I'm like, you know what? Stick with it. But we might make a tweak or two, but we're not going to gut the thing. And that's what they did. Somebody on that staff gutted it. And, you know, I'm glad he's back, and I'm glad he's sort of built it back up. But, yeah, it's just typical NBA bullshit, you know?
No doubt whatsoever, but just an interesting tidbit. Moving on to Phoenix, CP3, geez, unlucky. Top of the world in the first two games, having a hell of a playoffs, hell of a final series early on, stayed injury-free. It was kind of, you know, the rhetoric we were seeing everywhere was CP3's finally got there after a long season. We even spoke about it. He was going to be the second longest tenured player after Kevin Willis from winning a championship for a long career of more than 10 years. But yeah, just couldn't get it done. I guess the question for me is, and you know, that we both probably have, is what does he do now? Does he join a super team again, a la the Houston Rockets? I mean, I classify them as a super team because I think James and Eric Gordon, you know, James is an elite, and then Eric Gordon's that next tier superstar, and then you got Chris Paul. So I would classify that as a super team. Will he join a super team again, Pro? There's rumors the Lakers could be in the mix. That would probably mean he'd have to take a bit of a pay cut, I assume. Phoenix obviously in the best position to offer him the most money at the moment. The Knicks are still there. He is getting older. He does wear it around a little bit later on in the season. He did prove he's not doing that this year. But where do you see his future? Do you think he hangs around?
If I'm him, I'm going to re-sign in Phoenix. Now, does Phoenix want to give him $100 million? My guess is that they're going to make a huge jump backwards if they lose him. You know, campaign did very well for them for sure, and as a backup, and then played when Chris was out. He played an outstanding role for them. But I think you make he is a experienced vet, even though he's older, that you could lean on and he can carry a little bit. As you saw in Game 6, he fucking carried them. And they just fell short. But financially, you don't want to fuck your team up. If you're talking about giving them $33 million a year or so, $100 million over 3, what they're probably going to say is, you know what, we'll give you partially guaranteed year 3. We'll fully guarantee you year 1 and 2, and partially guarantee you 3. And he's got to make a decision. That's probably one of his best options for trying to get back to the finals and not fucking up his tax bracket. If he goes to the Lakers in free agency, it's mid-level. He's not going to do that. I mean, come on. I mean, I know he might want to win a championship. He's not Bernie fucking Mac and Mr. 3000, you know, coming back at age 45 just to get his 3000 hit. He's, you know, he could stay in Phoenix. They'll sign him because they need him. And that owner will take a lot of shit if they don't. But they'll probably partially maybe half guarantee the 3rd year. Then he can go to New York. Leon Rose, his former agent, and he could sign with them. They got about $55 million or so in cap room. They could easily sign him. New York people would love it. Superstar, doesn't matter how old you are. You can go back, he can go there and, they're okay. They're maybe one round and out. There are trade scenarios in a sign and trade with Phoenix, but I mean, LA just doesn't have any fucking assets, folks. They're not trading, obviously, Davis. They're not trading LeBron. And the rest of their roster, you can't get shit for. You can't. I mean, you can't get much for those guys. Can't get much for Kuzma, Gasol, Morris, Taylor and Horton. Tucker's okay.
Well, hold on a second, Pro. Kuzma said he's in the same class as Tatum, apparently.
Yeah, he is.
He actually said that.
Jaquil Tatum. He plays in Siberia.
A guy Kuz. He's a good player. He's a good player, but he's no Tatum.
No. I like Kuzma. I spent time with him in China. Good kid. But he needs to get back to simplicity. He tries to do too much. And I think he's messed his value up just a tad bit trying to do too much, and it shows in games. He's not consistent at that one thing that you could really rely on him for. But, you can get a little bit for Kuzma. For sure. You can get a little bit. But they need... I mean, you've seen it, Bogues. I mean, LeBron is breaking down. It's hard for him to play a full season. Davis, he's had injury problems his whole career, staying healthy. It's going to be really hard for LA to really acquire a really good player unless they take a big-time pay cut. I mean, even if you offered 4 or 5 players, even with Schroeder, I don't know, maybe sign and trade. I don't know how these things work, but sign and trade Schroeder and give Kuzma. But if you're a team, right, do you really want to take Schroeder at 20 plus million and then you got Kuzma for years because he just signed? You want to have those guys on your books. And what are you going to give back in return? What are you going to give them back? You're not going to give them back an all-star for those two guys.
I mean, Kuzma, Drummond, Schroeder. I mean, they have some stuff they can move. Harrell, potentially for Phoenix. If CP3 did a sign and trade and it was, spitballing, but Harrell, Kuzma, a throw-in, and then Chris Paul on a throw-in. I mean, it's doable. There are some assets there. If anyone's going to do it, it'd be the Lakers. They have some pieces that aren't too bad, but yeah, I mean, Kuzma's a big contract. Harrell's is reasonable. I think Harrell would do great in a system off the bench like Phoenix. But yeah, I mean, it's just going to be interesting to see what they do, just because the age thing, the Phoenix, as we've discussed, take that risk of giving a longer term deal, and they can't go full length max because of the age rule, which I assume CP3 being the head of the union will try to change in the next month or so. But yeah, just interested to see what happens and whether CP will buy into that whole I need a chip, I need to join a super team, or whether he will just rather bank that 20-30 million and not take a pay cut. So,
folks, what would you do? You're that age, right? You get 3 years. And I had a couple of conversations this past week or so about this. Are you taking $100 million with almost no chance of winning a championship? Or are you going to take veteran minimum, so you're making maybe $9 million over 3 years? You're going to give up $90 million?
Not that disparity, nah. My whole thing was if it was, if to stay in Phoenix and try to compete for a championship again, or go to LA. Let's say I was go to a shitty team. A shitty team offers Chris Paul, 3 years, $100 million, and a championship contending team offers him within 20% of that. You'd probably go to the championship team. But anything more than that for me, if it's double or more, you're crazy leaving that money on the table as much as you want to win. But, fans will say, oh, well, he's made $200 million in his career. Why does he need another 100? Well, who knows? Maybe he has a lot of baby mamas in Cali that he's paying $20K a month for. You never know. You never know what his needs are. You never know what his financial situation is. So I never judge people upon taking more money because you don't know the circumstances. Divorce can be expensive, so there's a lot of different things going on. But yeah, I'm usually within 10-20%, I'd probably choose the winning team. If it's more than that, you just can't pass that up. It's generational, lifetime, life-changing money for not only yourself, your kids and their kids and their kids. So I'd probably weight it that way. But I think you'll have suitors. But his bestie LeBron was at the game, so I think LA would potentially make a push, but maybe not. To have LeBron aging, CP3 aging, and unfortunately often injured Anthony Davis, you're putting a lot of money in 3 baskets that might not, combined play, 100 games for you, so it's a tough one.
And then you got nothing left. At least now, right? They're not a good team, the Lakers. But at least now you've got Caruso. You got Kuzma. I'm just saying coming off the bench. You got Kuzma. You got Horton. You got Montrez. You got Gasol. Yeah, you got Markieff. If you make this trade Now you're talking about, in a perfect world, Schroeder, Kuzma, Horton. You probably could do the deal like that. You don't need to throw Montrez in because I think Kuzma's at like 13 or 14 million. Schroeder's going to be at like 20 million. So right there, you got it. Now, if I'm Phoenix, I'm not a big Tucker Horton fan. I think he's a good player, but he can't really shoot it. He'll get better at that, but he's just okay. But he's a young asset. So for me, I want picks, although they gave most of their picks in New Orleans in the AD trade. But like Schroeder, so you're talking about no Schroeder, no Kuzma, no Horton, and then also picks. Like, so now you got to fill in with just veteran minimums because now you're going to have, CP at 33 million. You're going to have LeBron at 3 billion, and you're going to have Anthony Davis at his money. It's going to be really hard to sign anybody else. So
plus draft picks, plus any kind of young talent, that's a problem. But I'll go on record. The Lakers are going to go all in to win a chip. LeBron's not going to allow them to even talk about rebuild, and a similar team will do the same thing, which we'll talk about shortly. But they're not going. They're going to go for the home run. It might not be CP3. It might be someone else, but could be Dame. But they're gonna make some sort of play to get another big three in there and try to. They need a chip in the next year or two with LeBron aging. So that's I think it's. Everyone, and including Stevie Wonder, can see that they're pushing the chips to the table. They're not going to just keep this roster and make small tweaks. They're going to go bang. So, and
when you're thinking about a Dame trade or a trade like, they're going to get this third player, true, okay, great, they need it, but you also got to think about, well, would the other team do this? The salary, like it's, you got a million people going to that fucking ESPN trade machine. Like the trade works financially. But you think the other team would really fucking do it? That's what you got to ask yourself. Yeah, why would they do it?
Yeah, Schroeder at a big number. I wouldn't do personally. Period. I'd just feel like no, give us something else. But anyway, credit to Phoenix to finish this off. I mean, they had a hell of a run. No one we picked them to lose in every round they got through, and they were fantastic. They overachieved. They were great. Monty Williams. I mean, credit to him going into the Bucks locker room after they lost the series. It's something I haven't seen very, very often. Now that could be because everything's televised these days, and it's probably happened before, but a camera missed it. But if that's the case, I apologize to coaches that have done it. But I thought that was a very, very nice gesture by Monty Williams.
I think Giannis invited him. I thought I read that today, that he was very thankful that Monty came in and came into their locker room after he invited him. But I might be wrong. But no, it's classy for sure. Like Monty Williams has been a class act since he's been in the league. Head coach in New Orleans, assistant, I think, in Oklahoma City, Philly. He's been in a bunch of places. I mean, he just carries it with class. He's a good guy. I've never really been around him, but people that worked for him before love the guy. There's not many people at all that says anything bad about him. You say Giannis is the most likable player, he might be one of the most likable coaches that you've ever seen, because he's just a good guy, and he's in there with his players. His players go hard for him, and no one ever says a bad word about the guy. And give Phoenix a lot of credit. They fought hard. No one, including us, gave him any type of chance to win anything, and they came in there guns a-blazing. And they made it all the way to the finals. And I mean, I don't care what they say. Like Devin Booker played his ass off. CP played his ass off. Bridges, Crowder, Ayton, Cam Johnson, Cam Payne, you name it, Kaminsky. Those guys played hard. They just didn't have enough at the end of the day. And it's a great thing for that organization. That fan base need to be players. They need to be very happy about where they stand right now in today's league. It's a great thing. Good for them.
It is, and always good to see two small markets in there and battle that out. Okay, so mid-range game. We talk about how, I mean, for me, I got you to look at some numbers, and I think you racked your brain trying to find some of this stuff. But it seemed like for me in the eye test, there was a much more mid-range jumpers, if I can get that out properly, that, in the playoffs and the finals, it just seemed like it was whenever there was a big bucket needed, it seemed like it ended up being a mid-range. So we crunched some numbers in the regular season. So we factored mid-range a little bit differently. Anything outside the charge circle, so 3 feet, 3, 4, 5 feet, to inside the 3. In the regular season, league-wide was 37% of the shots were taken there and 39% in the playoffs. In this final series, Phoenix had 43% of their shots from that range, and Milwaukee were down on league average, so they were at 33%. Now, I thought it'd be a little bit higher. I thought Middleton took a fair few mid-ranges, but I guess with Milwaukee, they were, Giannis was either 1 foot in the charge circle dunk layup, or he was at the free throw line, and they were hitting a lot of threes as well at one point in their big analytics. But Phoenix were over the league percentage, which was interesting. CP3 loves that mid-range, and Devin Booker was hitting the mid-range, and then obviously Aiden hitting hooks outside the paint probably inflates that number a little bit. But yeah, the eye test for me was that a lot of the big shots were mid-range, but the numbers don't see a massive jump, but 6% up for Phoenix when you factor in the regular season is a big jump, but then, you go on the other side of the ball and Milwaukee was down. So interesting.
Folks, you hear it all the time, threes, layups. It's around all 30 teams. That's the way they want to play. Analytics has taken over as far as everybody's thought process, from management to coaches to players. That's what they want to play. But if you go back, even the last 10 years where analytics has really taken a jump, there hasn't been a championship team that didn't have at least one, if not two, probably on both teams, that dominated the mid-range game. In this series, Middleton took a bunch. You got, Chris Paul took a bunch. Lakers, you had LeBron. Miami Heat, you had Butler. I mean, Golden State, for as many threes as Steph Curry takes, he takes a bunch of those mid-range shots. Klay Thompson took a bunch of them. You got Kawhi Leonard, LeBron again. You just keep going back. You need mid-range shots. You hear Jeff Van Gundy saying it all the time. When players have to get into a shot, they always usually get to the elbow. It's some type of elbow drive off a pick and roll, isolation. It's usually some type of elbow shot or short corner shot. I think that shot is here to stay. And I think that when you watch it in the playoffs especially, you see players that are the best on the team. Yeah, they'll take their threes and they'll take those sidestep, step back bullshit shots. But a lot of the time, especially in the last 2 minutes of a game, crunch time, or deep shot clock, you're going to see them take that mid-range shot. And I think that that's a shot that everybody needs to work on, because it's a trusted shot. I think you have to maybe re-examine the types of shots you're going to take in the mid-range, where 8 guys draped all over you might want to get off of it. But I think the mid-range is a very powerful shot that is utilized in every playoff series, especially as you go deeper into the playoffs, and especially in the finals. What do you think, Bogues?
Yeah, just from the eye test, which wasn't, I thought it was way more. I thought it was a higher percentage than we just stated. But
Bogues, I'm half a fucking moron. I might be wrong on all those numbers, but I don't take that out of the realm of fucking possibility.
Yeah, it's approximate, but I think, it was noticeable for me that Phoenix were definitely up on mid-ranges. But yeah, I think every team wants to shoot the open three or get on the rim, and every team's trying to defend against it. So the mid-range in those, those run field clunky finals games where it's grind at times and then it's free flowing, then it's back to a grind. There's a need for those mid-range players, and that shot does become important at times because the defense is giving it to you. So, and Chris Paul was real effective with it throughout the playoffs. Like he's going right, but he'll go left to go right, and he'll get to that little fall away 10, 15 footer, and that's his bread and butter, and that's analytically a bad shot, but he's elite at it. So just interesting to talk, some numbers around that. We know analytics plays a big part in the game, and the mid-range jumper is frowned upon, but you'll see it a lot in FIBA as well. It's gonna rear its ugly head, especially when the quarterfinals come and it's a grind out game. It's gonna be a big shot that you're gonna have to make that most teams are giving up. Anyhow, moving on from the finals, congratulations once again to the Milwaukee Bucks. There was obviously some good stuff with celebrations, so jump online. There's so much content these days from the NBA. They do a great job of getting stuff out, and those celebrations are always fun to watch. The Warriors win now mode. There's rumors circulating, pro, that they're gonna move the 7th pick and the 14th pick to try and move for a win now situation. There's rumors around Lillard and once again Beal, who we've spoken about for the last 15 years about being a potential candidate for Golden State. But yeah, it's just interesting. I kind of assumed, I had a hunch that this would be the case. I don't think Steph Curry's in that. I don't think he wants another year that they had a couple of years ago where they, or the last 2 years really, they lost in the play-in, and then, You know, they were horrendous the year before with injuries and their roster. So he doesn't want any of those, let's rebuild some talent, let's go through the draft. We're 2-3 years away. He wants win now, rightfully so. He's earned that right to put that demand on the organization. I think they're listening. They're going to make a move. You know, Josh Giddey, Australian brethren, is rumored to be around between 7 and 14, so he could potentially go there. But they're going to make a move. They're going to trade for a big name to align with Steph and Clay and Draymond, and maybe Wiseman's included in that draft, those 2 draft picks. But what are you hearing on that end? Are they gonna do this and pull through for a start?
Here's what I hear: 46 million, 38 million, 32 million, and 24 million. That's what I fucking hear. Those are the salaries for their top 4 guys, salary wise. So that's. I mean, I'm a fucking half a moron. That's at least 140 million or so. So there's your salary cap right there. I don't think many people are going to still trade for Wiggins right now when you still owe him 64 million. So you're right. 2 draft picks and Wiseman, who makes 9.2 next year. So, you know, now with those 2 picks and Wiseman, that can get you about $12 million worth of player. You know, unless you trade in with the team that has a shitload of cap space, that they could absorb your money. They're taking it back, so they can't absorb it. So it's going to be hard for them to really get a player. Like I said, the only type.
I think they go over the cap. I think they heavily go over the cap to win now. I think they do. I don't know how far over they can go.
Yeah, but you can't though. It's not like baseball where you just write checks and you could pay you pay your luxury tax. If you're over the cap, the only way you could bring in a player is by signing with your exceptions, which they're way over. So they'll have the taxpayer mid-level exception. That's like $4 million. So you can't do it there. You get minimums you could sign. Your biannual exception, which is nothing. And you can't take a player on unless you get money out. You got to come within 25% of the money. So if you get $9 million going out, because look, here's what they got left, folks. You got $9 million of Wiseman, Looney's at $5 million, which I think it's an option, I think he's going to opt out. I've heard $2 million for Poole, $1.9 million for Lee, Allen Smilagic 1.7, Eric Pascal 1.7. So you don't really have money to generate to get out. Unless you're going to trade Draymond, unless you're going to trade Wiggins. You know, that's the only way with those 2 picks and a Wiggins. If this was fucking 2013, you know, and people actually liked Wiggins, then you'll be like, yeah, we'll take him right now. I just don't think of Wiggins' inconsistency at $64 million left in his deal, 2 years at 31 and 34, why anyone would really take that. But yeah, they need to. You're right. They need to win now. They need to trade those picks for, and put it with something else to get a guy that they can get. What do you see? Like,
would a team be enticed by Wiggins with the 7 and 14th pick as well? That's let's say a team that's in a rebuild, they've got cap space.
Yeah, if you're San Antonio and San Antonio's got like $60 million, but the way they handle the cap, they probably wouldn't do it. But yeah, they would do it. Wiggins to New York, because New York's got $50+ million to spend. They could do it. Dallas won't do it because they've got about $20+ million. So they could probably make it work, but they won't make it work for that.
You know, Detroit, I'm just thinking about a team that kind of sucks and has no chance the next couple of years. They value the 7 and 14th pick. They really like this draft. We'll eat a shit sandwich with a look. Wiggins isn't horrible, but the contract is over a little bit. But we'll eat that bad contract. We'll get 7 and 14. Yeah, you know, maybe that'll work long term. Who knows?
Bogues, that works. I'm sorry, you're right. Like Detroit, definitely. I didn't even figure that. I thought they had a little bit more salary on the books, but all they got is Grant at 20, Corey Joseph at 12.6, and they got Mason Plumlee at 8. So they've probably got about $40+ million in cap room. They could probably do it there. But here's the thing, Bogues. You're going to give Detroit Wiggins. You're going to give them the 2 picks. What are you going to get back that's going to really help you? Jeremy Grant, maybe?
Yeah, maybe there's a third team involved. Yeah, Jeremy Grant's the one. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm just saying, like, maybe a team that's just not going to be good. They eat the Wiggins thing with the cherry of 7 and 14, and they maybe get Washington, potentially. But yeah, I mean, I guess Wiggins for Beal with 2 picks. Who knows?
Yeah, I think they're gonna make a deal. I think they make a deal. I don't think they could wait on these 2 picks that are just going to be, they'll probably be good players for sure, but I agree with you. I don't think Steph Curry's waiting. I don't think Klay Thompson's going to wait. And that organization, that fan base, and that new building that's very expensive, I don't think they want to wait on it. So I agree with you. I think they're going to try to be aggressive making a move. I've heard the rumor has it that they don't even need a franchise player with the 2 picks, that they're just going to take an okay player.
Solid star, like a third, fourth tier star. Yeah. We'll watch the space. We need to get Sherwood back on to discuss Warriors. New Orleans, Willie Green hired as a head coach, we mentioned last week. Now, Jock Vaughn comments, I don't know if these were on record or off record, but they were leaked, that basically said that he ran himself out of the race leading up to the hiring because the GM, David Griffin, basically wanted to have his hands on roster building and management and how everything is ran from a coaching point of view. So Jock Vaughn probably saw that as something he didn't want to do. Willie Green is a rookie head coach, hasn't coached before. Maybe there's some truth to that because he'd be a little bit more easier to have your handprint on as a GM. But they're pretty interesting comments because you never want to be in a situation where your GM's dictating who you play and where and exactly who you sign and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the teams that work best, it's an open collaboration of debates about all that, but you definitely don't want a GM involved around minutes and all that kind of stuff. I found those comments pretty intriguing.
Bogues, that's a new thing that's going around the league. It's not league-wide yet, but I would say at least 33% of the league, the GM has a lot to say about who you're going to hire, who you're going to play, and when you're going to play it. And they hire most of your staff. Not all of it, but most of it. And I think, in my opinion, that's very dangerous. That's dangerous because you don't want your coach in your draft room telling you who to draft. You don't want your coach telling you, as a GM, who to sign in free agency and to do your job for you. As a GM, 99% of the GMs aren't qualified to do that shit anyway. They're usually just getting it off their analytics guy. And I think that it needs to be a collaboration. See, I think if you get a rookie coach, say Jamal Mosley, okay? Jamal Mosley gets hired. And Willie Green, if you say, hey, Willie, we want you to hire one of the coaches in front of your bench. Here's 5 names. Pick one of these guys. They're all ex-head coaches. We really feel comfortable because you've never coached as a head coach before. We want you to have one of these guys that we really feel as though has a great, it'll be a great mentor for you. Then you could hire whoever you want across the board. We don't care. But when you come in and you say, well, you're going to play, I think the GM should have say in these things. I think they should have a say in your player development because those are assets for your organization, and your head coach is going to last an average of 3.5 years. We've already done the study. So your player development should be through your organization. I think that there should be an understanding from the head coach to your general manager that the player that you draft needs a certain amount of minutes throughout the year. So whenever they can, please find a certain amount of minutes throughout the year, every month, every 6 months, every year for this rookie. But as far as your rotations, as far as their coaching hires, I think that it has to be from the head coach because I think all these young coaches have to make mistakes. And they have to get better. And they have to figure it out. And yes, they could need some help from your analytics and things like that for lineups. But you can't be dictating that shit. Because it's fucking bad business, man. Because now, most of these head coaches are only going to get one chance. Especially the young ones. They're going to get one chance. If they fuck it up, they may never coach again. So you're going to worry about a GM doing that shit for you. And now when I get fired, I can't really explain that. Because nobody wants to fucking hear it. Because I'm already yesterday's news.
It's a suicide mission. Essentially, it's lose for the coach. Because if you do well, it's like, well, the GM picked your staff. If you do bad, it's like, well, you're a bad coach. It's like,
Bogues, it's a total credit deal. Everybody wants to take credit for the whole thing instead of working together. Instead of saying, you know what, I can't fire you and you can't fire me. Let's just fucking do this thing together. I'm not gonna interfere with you. And you're not going to interfere with me. I think that's the best way to do it.
Yeah, no doubt. It's always hard when you want to look. If it's a rookie head coach, you might say, "Look, we want you to hire a former, head coach or someone that was a head coach as your head assistant, and leave the rest to you." You hear that, and that's fair enough. But someone dictating your whole staff's interesting. Also saw Nate McMillan hired his son. Did you see that?
No, I didn't. He hired his son.
Yeah, Jamil McMillan as an assistant coach. So that is interesting. Very, very interesting. So you never want to see those kind of hirings, in my opinion, just because it doesn't smell right. But just an interesting one that I just saw. He actually hired his son, and he's had a fantastic year, and deservedly will get got an extension and all that kind of stuff. But then to go out and hire your son is interesting.
I mean, look at it from ownership, from management, from coaching. Nepotism is league-wide. If somebody has a son, a daughter now, they're going to be in the team. When they get old enough, they're going to be part of the team. You could fucking guarantee it. There are some that say, you know what? You're going to start as a low-level employee and work your way up. Or someone is just going to say, fuck it, I don't give a fuck. I don't care if you spent 3 days in this thing. I'm going to give you a job that pays $300,000 and you're not going to be qualified for it. I mean, there's plenty of those motherfuckers in the league too. Don't get me wrong. So, I mean, that's just league-wide. You expect it. Look, I've dealt with both sides of it. Like, I worked with Austin Ainge, who's Danny Ainge's son, who was an assistant college coach. Like, he played at BYU, assistant college coach, and then I think he worked in the front office with the Celtics for a year, and then went to the D League, coached as a head coach in the D League for 3 years, and then went back in the front office for Boston, and now has worked his way up. Like, that is fine. That worked his way up. He's done a bunch of different things. But then there are some people that says, yeah, you're going to be the assistant GM. Like you just graduated and you just took your last bong hit from your fucking from your grad school fucking, fraternity. And now you're going to be the assistant fucking GM of the team you can't name 5 guys in the whole fucking league. Like that, there's sort of 2 different schools of thought with this thing. And
I don't know Jamel. Yeah. I don't know Jamel too well. Maybe he's a fantastic coach.
I don't either.
It does smell a little bit. And I'm in the ballpark of what you just mentioned. If my kids and I was involved in a team, they'd be starting as the janitor and working their way up, because I want them to understand that this isn't a luxury that you just get. This isn't something that you just get given to you. You need to work up, respect the people above you, and then slowly climb the ladder. I wouldn't do it the other way around, just because I think it's a bad life lesson and life skill. And we see it on in all walks of life. I think the kids that are the most, turn into being the most grounded adults in their role as a coach or a CEO or whatever, usually start at the bottom and work their way up. The ones that get given it, everyone's snickering and laughing behind their back. Generally, that's just the way it goes, and that's the way the world works. Vaccines, pro. This is an interesting one. So we're not going to have a debate about the vaccine specifically, but the NBA Summer League has announced their vaccine protocol for 2021 Summer League. Fully vaccinated players, no advanced testing required. PCR test upon arrival. That's the quick one. No daily or game day testing. No quarantines for close contact. So if you run into someone that has it, you don't have to quarantine, apparently. No restrictions for activities in Las Vegas. Any in-person interactions are fine. Non-vaccinated players, 1 PCR test within 2 days prior to traveling to Las Vegas. PCR test upon arrival. Required to undergo daily and game day testing. 7-day quarantine if a close contact to somebody that has it. Must remain at team's hotel except league or team activity. Any outdoor meal at a restaurant attended only by other players and team attendees. Engage in physical activity outdoors. No large indoor social gatherings, so like a summer league game. No indoor restaurants, bars, lounges, and indoor entertainment venues like an NBA arena you'll be playing the summer league games at. And no overnight guest pro, so the working girls in Vegas are going to have a few nights off. But this was interesting because it's, from what I've understood, you can still get the virus and pass the virus around even if you are vaxxed. I believe I could be wrong, and I get a lot of shit. I'm not an epidemiologist, and people on Twitter tell me every day, but I believe the vax prevents the severity of you if you happen to get coronavirus. So these rules are pretty interesting. I think the writing's on the wall. They're pretty much railroading you into getting the vaccine. Now, I'm not an anti-vaxxer for those out there. I'm kind of questionable on COVID vax at the moment because I just want to wait and see how it all goes about all my other vaxxers. So I'm kind of in the middle, just intrigued by it all, just seeing how it all goes. I know you've had your Vax Pro and had no issues with it, right?
Yeah, I was hoping that, loss of weight would be one of the side effects. Those motherfuckers were lying to me when I took it. But No, I've taken it. I needed it for travel. I needed it for travel. I was going to Greece, and I couldn't get into the country without testing. And they were more comfortable with me getting vaccinated and traveling to Greece. So the people that were sending me over there, so I did it. I was fine. My family did it, and no side effects for me. I'm not an anti-vaxxer or anti. I'm not against people who don't get it. It's your choice. Whatever you want to do, you do. What I have an issue with this, Bogues, is not them sort of pushing you into getting vaccinated. What I can't understand, in the NFL, you saw 2 assistant coaches getting fired in the NFL for not getting vaccinated. Why isn't it the same for the players? So you're gonna because I've heard
assistant
NBA
coaches,
teams,
right? Yeah. Explain that.
Yeah, I've heard NBA teams. You can't travel with the team or be with the team or be at the headquarters in certain days if you're not vaccinated. So my question is, why aren't you going to throw this on the players? See, this will make me think as a staff member, I'm a lesser human being than a player. And there's certain things that players should have over staff members. They are the show. They are the talent in the league and why the league's worth as much money as it is, for sure. But in something like this, you all got to be unified. Either everybody's going to get it or nobody has to get it. And that's my thing. If I'm a staff member, I'm sitting there wait a minute, you're going to either threaten to fire me or I can't be with the team because I'm not vaccinated, but 9 out of our 13 players aren't vaccinated and you're okay with that. I would have an issue with that for sure. But yeah, it falls on deaf ears, brother.
Yeah, I'm pro-choice, so I have no issue with people getting the vax if they want to get it. I have no issue with people who say I don't feel comfortable getting it. I want to wait and see. I have no issue either way. It's almost become a dividing point politically as well. It is what it is, but just these rules are interesting. I'm going to be watching with interest to see how this all goes because you look at politically what France has done. They've now said if you don't have your vax, you basically can't go anywhere. You're a hermit. You can't go to grocery stores. You can't go to restaurants, cafes. We know the French love cafes and croissants and all that kind of stuff. So you can't do anything. So this is starting on that path within the NBA. Private organizations, yes, they have a right to do that, but it just will be interesting to watch where it all goes. I know there are a lot of people in the league that are skeptical on it that I've spoken to, that there are a high percentage have been vaccinated, but LeBron James hasn't confirmed. He's one that rumor has it he hasn't had the vax, and he's the superstar of the league. And I know there's a lot of players that are I'm just going to wait and see how it goes, and I think that should be your right as well. I don't argue against that. So just they're basically making it hard for you if you haven't had it. That's a lot of extra work you have to do, and you're kind of a hermit in your room, and you're not supposed to leave. And I assume they're going to go pretty hard if they find out you've left your room and you haven't been vaccinated. But I just wonder if this brings on any appeals in courts and wrongful dismissals and all that kind of stuff, because it can get pretty slippery.
I would think that they're going to start firing some people that don't have it staff wise, and that you're going to see a lot because for those NFL coaches, right? There's it's huge NFL COVID protocol for that, and 2 of these coaches refused to get it, and then they either parted ways or fired the guys, and they can't work anywhere else because it's the same rules everywhere else. So I think there's definitely going to be lawsuits in the NFL for sure. In the NBA, I'm sure they're going to start firing some people. I'm sure they still got to pay their contracts, of course, but in the next year or so, they're going to start firing people. They might say, okay, 1 year, it's okay. You could just stay home, do it remote, but by year 2, you're going to have to do this. We're going to fire you. And you're going to see, I can't guarantee it, but I'm very highly positive that you're going to start seeing a lot of lawsuits from staff members fired, low-level staff members fired from NBA teams for sure.
Especially with a double standard you mentioned, because that's all you'd bring to the court case. You'd say, well, hang on a second. Yeah. If I have to do this, but this employee doesn't, that's clear discrimination. So it's going to be an interesting time in our world, and we're following that closely within the NBA. And I've spoken to a few players that even played last season where some teams had actually implemented the same rules already quietly, where they'd actually said, I know for a fact one of the teams in the playoffs did not bring their strength and conditioning coaches, both of them, and their shooting coach into a playoff series because they weren't vaxxed. And from what this player told me, they said that it messed them about a bit. They don't have their strength and conditioning coaches there that prep them, that stretch them, and they don't have their main shooting coach there. And it ended up being pretty interesting. So Ryan Rosillo, pro, you put me onto this. I'm talking about media hot takes. Break it down for us.
Ryan Rosillo basically he put out a video. He has a very popular podcast. He does a lot of stuff with Bill Simmons. He's been around forever. I've known him since I was back in Boston. He put out this 13-minute video on YouTube, basically shaving himself and a lot of the other media for sometimes how they cover, not necessarily himself, but a lot of other people on their hot takes as far as like anointing people kings or destroying them in like a 1 game or a 2 game stretch. And he just goes out and is very honest about it. Ryan is a very honest dude. I love his podcast. I love when he speaks because he watches a ton of film and he's always working it. And he basically says how the media should be ashamed of themselves of how they cover the league sometimes, how they just like all these hot takes they have on players and teams and things like, talking about Stephen A. Smith calling Booker, Kobe, and, other people destroying the Milwaukee Bucks and destroying, Budenholzer, how he coaches. I think he was probably referring to Perkins and some of the talking heads of how they cover things. And then how they want to automatically anoint somebody king and then destroy him, in a very short time after that. I think it's a very popular thing that's done by the media. And also, like, on one day you love a guy and the next day you hate the guy and there's nothing in between saying, hey, wait a minute, I made a mistake. This is why. It's like you never said it. And they just keep on piling on this bullshit and it just keeps on going and going. I thought it was a great video. I watched it like 2 or 3 times. Like I said, I always like Ryan's takes. What do you think, Bob?
Yeah, he just made some valid points just because there's so much time to fill for these talking heads on media, and you look at these TV shows on ESPN and whatever, right? It's like there's just so much time to fill. And that's why I like, not tooting our own horn with this podcast is that we can go for an hour and a half, or we can go for 2 hours and a half with gays on it. We can go for 3 hours. We can go for 90 minutes, 60 minutes. The whole point is we want to give our takes and our analysis on things. And if that's it, that's it. We don't want to then be like, have a producer, hey, you need to just talk shit about something random for 30 minutes. Let's hate on this guy. And that's the unfortunate reality of these shows. They have guaranteed time allotments they need to fill. And that was Rosillo's other point is like after they've spoken about, okay, let's break down the finals. Then it's like, okay, is Devin Booker the next Kobe? And you're just like, geez, like it's just too much. It is too much. I'm not a huge fan of it. I think there's intriguing debates. Like, at times you might have debates about older players. I don't love them, but they get people talking. I get it. But like the Kobe Booker thing for me, and we mentioned it, those comments, and I pushed back on that podcast a couple of episodes ago. It's just like, what are you doing? Like, Booker's different, and even Booker came out and said, like, let's put that aside. Like, I'm Devin Booker and Kobe's Kobe. Like, if I can get there one day, great. But I'm a long way away from there, and he's right. It's like, why do we need to straight away box someone into being? Because then all that happens then is Booker now doesn't win that final series. He didn't play particularly well in a couple of the games. He's no Kobe. Who the hell said? And it's like, well, he didn't say it. I'm not a fan of it, and I liked what Rosillo said. He looks very well researched, well spoken, has great takes. So highly recommend. He's on with Simmons a fair bit as well, and he's pretty good.
Yeah, like Ayton being David Robinson and all this stuff. It's just, they just, what it is, Bogues? It's a nuclear arms race to see who said it first. Again, all those bullshit stats, like this guy was the first guy to do this, or first guy to do this, or first team to do this. Everybody wants to be first. And they don't care about how they get there. They'll just throw everything out there. And then they'll be like, oh, remember I said this? I was the first to report this. I was the first to say this guy was the next this or this. So they throw all these great things about these players, and they want to be the first. They want to take it. They want to be the first one. They want to take all the credit. I mean, what's sick about the playoffs too, Bogues? A little off topic on it is like every player that won a championship for Milwaukee, every person who threw a pass to a player, they wanted to take credit for every second.
I forgot to even mention this. Oh my God, bro.
Every trainer, coach, junior high coach, third grade guidance counselors. I even saw Bogues, a fucking coach, take credit for talking an assistant coach from Milwaukee from working on Wall Street to coaching, basically taking all of his fucking credit for this guy winning a championship, basically saying, oh, I was the guy who did that. Why do people love to say that shit? Why do everyone wants to take every ounce of credit and squeeze all the fucking oxygen out of the room.
I think it being Milwaukee's first championship in, 40, 50 odd years, without knocking them, I think they overdid it. Two former teammates of mine, Michael Redd, three actually, Desmond Mason was there, and Brandon Jennings, it was a former teammate of mine, and he's a great kid, but he was on a float to the parade, it's like, oh man, like that was a tough one for me to see. I get having the legends, but Michael Redd, Desmond Mason, great people first and foremost. They were there, but it wasn't really about them so much, you know what I mean? But Brandon was like, I get, because he had that infamous Bucks in 6 interview, 10 odd years ago, and I get all that, but I'm like, dude, like, why you want to float? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I get it, you were part of the organization, but it's like, oh man, I totally agree. I had a bit of a laugh. There were some shenanigans going on.
Not only was he on the float, he was making an ass out of himself. Like, he must have guzzled about 82 beers in that 2-hour period. Pouring it on himself, spitting into the crowd in a COVID situation, just spitting out beer in an open area. I mean, I don't care about that, but it's just like, it was. I'm sorry I cut you off. What were you saying on that?
It's just, I mean, the people that should be celebrated, in my opinion, the 15 players in the squad, your assistants and your staff, and that's kind of it, right? Like, I mean, the legends and all that, like, they show up to the game, they do a few interviews, that's it. It's about those players that won it. They did it. And I wouldn't, to be honest, like, I want to chip with Golden State, but if Milwaukee, if I managed to get out there, I would have went. If I wasn't in Australia, I would have watched the game, congratulated them, and then got my ass away from the cameras. It wasn't, I did nothing, to contribute to those guys. You might say, oh, you were there at one point and whatever, and that's what I struggled with.
The trainers and shooting coaches are unbelievable. Like, if you work with a player one time in their 30 years of life, you're gonna come up with that picture and you're gonna tweet it out when they win a championship. It is fucking disgusting.
The grifting's all time. It definitely, when there's a chip, here's a photo of when I told Giannis to take 12 seconds to shoot the free throws. That was me. Yeah. Here's a photo of me talking to him for those 12 seconds. You can see I'm looking at my watch because I was timing it. It's like, all right, buddy.
Yeah, you have a pocket watch you take a picture of. I mean, give me a fucking break. Come on.
I mean, it is interesting, and that I definitely had a laugh at that. And each to their own. That's all good and well. But I just couldn't do it. That's just me. And I think the other thing that I struggle with, and they got some flack, and it is historic, is the owners getting the trophy first is something that. It's been hotly debated the last week and should be. It's just a bad look, in my opinion. I think, yes, they own the team, but that thing goes to the blood, sweat, and tears first. It goes to, Giannis, the coaching staff, the players, and then, have your owners come on and handle the trophy. But the fact that it just killed the moment. I don't know if you watched it, but they handed the trophy to the owners and it just went flat and quiet. And everyone was like, what the hell is going on? No offense to the owners, but they're a lot of times they're unrecognizable and, they're billionaires and millionaires, whatever, but they're not recognizable faces. So a lot of times people are like, is that the GM? Like, who is that guy? You know what I mean? So it just kind of dulls the moment, and then it goes back to the players, and then the crowd gets up on their feet again. But I think the owner thing should be something they put, third or fourth in line, in my opinion.
Yeah, Bogues. I mean, the owners today aren't 75-year-old oil men that don't care, like they used to be. Like, they were out of the way a lot of times. Yeah, they'd be in the locker room with the trophy at some point. But you have a lot of younger people. And when I say younger, I'm not saying 20s and 30s, but you have people in their 40s and 50s, and then the social media world, and everybody wants to do their deal, and be seen. And, a lot of times you have ownership groups with like 20 people in them. It's not just a one person sometimes. And yeah, it's a little uncomfortable, but then again, those guys did pay the $3 billion to keep them in, or whatever they pay. Not $3 billion. It's not worth that, but that ownership group, that owner, Lazzary's got a pretty good story about working his way to nothing, to doing what he's doing today. But I agree with you. Like, sometimes they take the moment away, but it is what it is. Like, Yeah,
you still celebrate it, just not first. Not first. You celebrate it, be in the group photo, all that kind of stuff. But let's just, give it to the players first, and then we can do all those formalities after, in my opinion. And I could be wrong. People could disagree, but most people, I think, had said, like, what the hell is this? But just one of those things.
Yeah.
David Mintz signs with Reebok, so a young high school athlete, before attending Kentucky. This is an interesting one because what is Kentucky? They're a Nike school, right? So he's now signed with a rival brand, but I did some research on this when you sent it to me. So the deal pertains to only away from the court, pro, and away from basketball. Right. So he's only allowed to wear his Reebok gear and promote it in a casual sense. I believe he can't do anything with a Kentucky uniform and Reebok together. But just interesting, the fact that, Kentucky is a huge, huge Nike school. There's a lot of schools out there that are known. Oregon's a Nike school. There's schools that you just know they're Nike or they're Adidas or they're Reebok, whatever. And just interesting that he went with a rival brand. But, I wonder what that brand really gets out of it if they can't really promote this kid playing basketball, which is why he's in Reebok. It's an interesting one.
Yeah, because Reebok has really been out of the basketball game for a while. They sort of downshifted what they did, and maybe a little bit like Puma, where they wanted to do more lifestyle, off the court, sort of just lifestyle shoes and things. Most of these shoe companies want to have the relationship with these kids early. I don't know anything about these NIL contracts, but I'm wondering if they have an option, or the kid has an option to sign with them. And when he goes pro, I'm not sure about how the deals are structured, but yeah, he can't wear it on the court. He can't wear it in practice. He could wear it around campus, but he can't do everything away from the court. So what's weird with these shoe companies, Bogues, they put so much money into these kids. Now they're actually putting real money into it. They put all the money into the AAU teams, paying the coaches and, paying the teams to play under their umbrella. But it doesn't really matter because the kids don't really care. They get the gear and stuff, but they only care about who gives them the most money when they're negotiating their deal when they're pros. So yeah, they're getting in with the kid. They're having a relationship with them. And now if he becomes a pro, maybe they're thinking because of that relationship of the year they spent in their gear and sort of talking to the kid and befriending him, maybe he'll sign with them, when it's time to turn pro. But it's a weird deal just because of Kentucky being such a Nike school. And every picture that kid's going to take on the court is going to be with the Nike shoe. So maybe they're going to do ads and stuff in Slam Magazine with him wearing his Reeboks out going to a Waffle House in fucking, downtown Lexington, Kentucky. I don't know. But it is a weird deal.
Yeah, I butchered his name. It's Davion Mintz. But apparently a big following on social media. Is that right?
Yeah, I think he's got a pretty big following. He's got a pretty big following. Did we talk about the Mikey Williams kid? That's I think he's out of California, the high school kid that signed with one of the bigger agents. I forgot, but he signed. He's got 5 million social media followers across all of his platforms, and the deal's supposed to be for millions. He's only entering. I think he's entering his either junior or senior year in high school. His name's Mikey Williams. He's a big time recruit. I think he's out of San Diego. I think he's going to be a senior in high school, and he just signed. He signed this. I got Leon Rose in my head, but it's not. But anyways, he signed this deal with this agency for the NIL thing, and it's supposed to be worth millions of dollars. Before he even gets into college. We talk about this stuff, Bogues. I'm not liking. I like the fact that these kids can make money, but I don't like the fact that what it's going to do to their mentality before they become a pro. And that's the big thing. When guys went to college for 3 or 4 years and then went to be pros, the mentality of being a pro, usually, even if their college coach sucked, which in a lot of cases they did, but they would mature a little bit, played in some big games. They have some maturity. Then they get all their money when they get to the pros. And then some of them are mature, some of them aren't, but at least they had some time to mature. They didn't have a lot of money, even if they were getting paid by their college under the table. It wasn't a lot of money. It wasn't life-changing money. But a lot of these kids are going to be having this life-changing money. Only a few of them are, not a lot of them, but a few of them are already going to make $1 million a year or $800,000 a year before they get to the NBA. What is that going to do to their work ethic? The work ethic of these kids, for the most part, are in the shitter as it is. Imagine you're making $1 million a year or $800,000 a year, and then some fucking college coach is going to tell you got them by the balls anyway, and some college coach is going to tell you, yeah, you got to come in for conditioning tomorrow at 6 a.m. I'm just wondering what the mentality is going to be of those kids.
Yeah, there'll be a bit of entitlement there. Got an apparel deal worth more than what your coach is on.
Yeah, no doubt. Jeff Schwartz, by the way. Jeff Schwartz is the agent.
Okay, yeah. It's just interesting to see how it's changing, how the worm's turning towards being able to, like what I've always said, that college athletes should get something. I think now that the water main is burst, and now it's just a free for all. So it'll be interesting to watch and see how it goes. But I wonder if schools start putting in provisions where they can protect their brands now, because is Kentucky as valuable as a brand as a school to Nike now? If players can sign with rivals, even though they're not wearing them on the court, they're still promoting them on social media.
It's crazy.
So that'll be interesting.
Yeah. No, these schools now, like North Carolina, is actually starting programs now to actually, the kids that sign at their schools, they're going to introduce them to the sponsors that sponsor their programs. There are a few, there's about 5 or 6 teams that really make money in college. Texas is one of the biggest, Ohio State, North Carolina, Duke, Kentucky, Kansas probably, and there's a few others. But imagine all the millions of dollars they get in sponsorship, the companies that like name the arena and things like that. Imagine now with these schools that have all this money in their brand, now like enticing kids to sign with them because you're going to introduce them to the CEO of like Papa John's Pizza, or CEO like Phil Knight at Nike if you're Oregon, or whatever, and having the opportunity to sign sponsorship deals in college because of the relationships that these schools have with these companies. It's imagine if you're Wichita State and you're trying to compete with this shit. And now it's all over again, Bogues. Like the whole discrepancy thing is starting all over. That's been the fight for 30 years, because not everybody's on a level playing field, and now it's going to be like this. Like everybody thought, well, okay, now all these kids can make all this money. Everybody's on an even playing field. The money you're going to get from North Carolina, Duke, and Kentucky, as far as your marketing dollars, is a little bit different than if you're going to sign with Boston College or fucking Clemson or someone like that. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. And that's why you just look at it as a whole. It's just going to be interesting to see what happens, because I think the value for these schools now, they're going to lose some money from sponsors. They're just not going to be as valuable. Nike might not pay $10 million a year anymore, because they might say, oh, well, we're only going to pay $5 million now. So I think it'll dilute that a little bit. But we'll watch that space. The Olympics begin tonight at the time of recording. It's been interesting. I watched a little bit of the opening ceremonies. I'm not an open ceremony guy, pro. I have not attended one of them. I've been to 3 Olympic Games.
Really?
No. 3 Olympic Games, have not attended one. It was just something I always did. The reason being, we usually would play either the next day or the day after. And these opening ceremonies for the athletes, okay, they are great. You walk around a track, you're on TV, but it's a shit show of a day. Like
I heard.
It's basically in some countries, Beijing, I think it was a 10-hour ordeal all up in humid, 30 degrees Celsius, 90 degree Fahrenheit weather in China, because you got a bus. Every country has to bus out of the village. Then you get to your waiting bays. They get you there 2-3 hours earlier. Then each country has to go. Then you got to wait for all the countries to finish. And then, in China, for instance, I think Australia was kind of towards the end of their alphabet, I believe. So we were one of the last countries out. You're sitting just in humid heat. There's no food there. You know what I mean? And now top that off with coronavirus restrictions, wearing a mask. I wouldn't have went again if I was there this time, but I actually caught a bit of it on TV, and it just felt dystopian, man. Like no fans. You got these athletes waving. It's like
waving to a fucking drone.
Yeah, who are you waving to? But I guess they're told away for TV. It just looked Hollywood produced without anyone in the theater watching it, and that's the unfortunate reality of what we're in the world with coronavirus. But I don't know if you saw it. It's great for TV.
You know what they're waving at, Bogues? They're waving goodbye to Japan's $25 billion they're going to lose in the fucking Olympics. They were actually flying away money, yen, on a fucking drone, and you're just waving goodbye to that $25 billion that they're going to take a fucking bath on that thing.
It's not good. Well, Australia got 2032, as we mentioned last time, competing against absolutely no one, because I don't think anyone wants that shit anymore. But anyhow, look, it is Olympics. The TV ratings were up, pro, because everyone's, at least in Australia, everyone's locked down in their house still. So I guess that's the one positive. But it just hit me watching it like, man, like there's a pandemic, coronavirus, but geez, and then top that off, there's massive protests in Japan because the poor bastards in Japan are in a state of emergency. They're completely locked down. They're not allowed to leave their homes. Yet you've got athletes flying from all around the world for an Olympic Games. Kind of tough for your own people, in my opinion, pro. I think if you've set this precedent of not letting your own people out of their homes for months on end, and you're busing and flying thousands and upon thousands of athletes and staff around your city, it's kind of it's a tricky situation. And there's for those that haven't seen, the athletes outside of all their arenas and stadiums, there's shitloads of Japanese people protesting. So it's going to be an interesting one.
Well, Bogues, there was actually Japanese Americans protesting outside my development and in my neighborhood, begging me not to pick any Japanese athletes or teams for gold medals on this fucking show. So that's the only protesting I've been seeing around here. So, but yeah, I mean, it's tough, man. I mean, especially what they're going through with the lockdowns and the state of emergency. Imagine if you're a poor prick that lives in somewhere in Japan, and you got all this stuff going. You got spikes in numbers and people dying and can't get vaccinated if you want to get vaccinated, and then they're celebrating these games in your country. It seems a little bit weird, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, it is. It is. It's not a good look.
Yeah.
The smell test, the pub test, as we say in Australia, it's not good, but hopefully it's a hassle-free Olympics other than that, and they can get in and get out, and there's no spikes from it, and Australia can win a gold medal in basketball. We'll watch that space. Stats, useful or useless. Devin Booker has the most points scored in a player's first postseason run in NBA history. Useful or useless?
I think it's pretty useful, especially how far he went. You know, how far he went in the tournament. If you would have said that, like, he had the most points averaged in his first playoff series, and then he lost 4-0 and his team lost by 30 every night, I'd say it was a bullshit stat. I would say it's pretty useful. I mean, he's gone. Like I said, he's in your first playoffs. Usually, your first playoffs is like it's just a test to see. Usually your first playoffs you don't do all that well, and then it's just you learn from it. I mean, going all the way to the finals in your first run and you score all those points and you do that well, I think it's pretty useful. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it is. I think it's remember, it's not points per game. It is, for those listening, it is, I think it's total points scored. So that was the tricky thing in this stat, the way they worded it. You can obviously have more points scored if your team goes 7 games every series. You got a better chance of breaking that record. But yeah, he had a phenomenal first run, and he's a great player. I mean, he has been the last couple of seasons, just hasn't won. So I think more people know his name now, and hopefully he continues on that trajectory. But I think it was a useful one. We'll go with the next one. In Space Jam 2, Pro, have you seen that movie yet, by the way?
No, I have not seen it yet.
Well, my kids want to see it, so that's an unfortunate reality for me. I might have to see it. Anyway, in Space Jam 2, the words Warner Brothers were shown or said 38 times. That's 10 times the amount of baskets LeBron made in the entire movie, which is 4.
That's a fucking spoiler.
Useless or useful?
I don't know. I'd say pretty fucking useless, to be honest with you. I mean,
it's useless. Yeah, it's useless, but it's so is saying Warner Brothers 38 times.
But you paid LeBron about you paid Clutch and LeBron about 500 fucking million, and he only scored 4 baskets. That's pretty fucking bullshit, to be honest with you.
Yeah. Interesting one anyway for Space Jam fans. Hopefully, I've heard it's not the greatest flick. LeBron aside, I heard it's pretty poor compared to the MJ one, but we'll see. The kids have seen the MJ one, and we'll let them be the judge. Next one, no player has ever averaged 30, 10, and 5 on 60% field goal percentage until Giannis. 32.3 points per game, 13 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.4 steals, 1.2 blocks, and a 61.2% from the field. Pro, useful or useless?
Very useful. Is that for a playoff or a final, Bogues?
I believe it's finals. Yeah, finals.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty damn good fucking finals. And that's 6 games, too. So, I mean, it did extend a little bit out. And, I mean, those are some big-time numbers, man.
The extension doesn't really matter because it's average, it's not total. So, phenomenal numbers.
Yeah. I agree. And a finals, and the kids' first finals, I mean, that's pretty big time.
And a pretty simple stat, so it's not overly done for me. That's why I liked it. 30, 10, and 5, 60% field goal percentage. Nice and simple. He's not talking about a Wednesday or a Saturday or a sunny day.
Unfortunately.
Nice, good stat. Very, very useful. Last one. Chris Paul is the first ever player to lose 4 best-of-7 series where his team led 2-0. The only other player with 3 was, do you know, without cheating?
Oh, man. I don't. Andrew Bogut? No, just joking.
Oh, wow. Former teammate of Chris Paul's. Former teammate. Not DeAndre Jordan, probably Blake Griffin. There you go. Blake Griffin has 3. So Chris Paul has led 2-0 in 4 best-of-7 series and lost them all. Useful or useless?
I think it's pretty useful. I mean, that's 4 series and best-of-7 up 2-0. And all those teams, you were the best player. You're the best player on most of them. I would say it's debatable this time, but yeah, it's pretty useful to see that. I mean, a lot of times in these situations, Like just like when you talk about plus minus in basketball, it's not just you, but when you're the best player and you have good teams and you're up 2-0, I think it's a pretty useful stat. What do you think?
Yeah, it's alarmingly useful. I mean, he's been in some. One was the infamous year. We thought Clippers were our big rivals in Golden State, obviously, and we thought we were going to get them in the conference finals. I believe it was, or the. Yeah, was it the conference finals or the second round? Either way, and it was that series they played Houston and Josh Smith, I think, hit all those threes, which was just crazy. And they ended up coming back and beating them, and we played Houston. So I remember one of those vividly because we were sitting around in our practice facility watching the game. We were basically prepping for the Clippers because they're up 3-1 and they ended up losing it. So anyhow, what do you got for us? Fact or fake news?
Bogues, here's what I got for you, brother. First one. Now that Giannis didn't jump ship to a super team and won a championship, this will put an end to super teams.
Fake news. It won't. I don't believe it will. Hopefully, maybe it grabs 10% of the league. Maybe 10% of the stars might now, do the thing Giannis did. But I think the majority, fake news, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said it a little earlier in the pod. I think that you'll see a little bit of an uptick of people maybe staying that you would have thought might have left after their second contract. But I think that, again, the majority of the league would rather take the path of the least resistance, and they'll try to team up with guys to make it a little easier on them to win a championship rather than saying, you know what, I'm going to stay in Detroit, or I'm going to stay in New Orleans, or I'm going to stay somewhere. I'm going to go somewhere else in either a better city, a city with two other players or one other player on it. I agree. I think, I say it's fake news. Okay, after a disastrous 2021 season, the Lakers will make a big move and bring in a third all-star player.
Fact, they're all in. As I mentioned, similar to the Warriors story, in my opinion. They got LeBron aging. AD's not getting any younger. He's got some injuries to deal with. They need that third wheel. And I know LeBron's going to be going gung-ho to try and figure out a way to do that. So, fact.
So you're going to say that they're going to bring in a player that's going to be in the top 30 to 35 in the league off of what they have in their roster. Okay.
Well, they're going to try.
I think they're going to definitely try. Yeah.
Whether it happens or not, but they will definitely be. I think they'll figure it out. The Lakers always figure it out with big names.
They do.
And they'll shuffle some deck chairs around and get it done.
Yeah, with Clutch, I could see that, but you know what? As usual, I'm gonna be the fucking oddball here and say they will not. I say it's fake news. I say they make a move, or multiple moves, but I just don't think that unless it's a sign and trade for Schroeder, put Kuzma in it. Even with that, I can't see getting a Bradley Beal or someone like that. But maybe a Chris Paul, that's a possibility, but I still doubt it. I'm gonna say fake news. I'll say fake news on that one. All right, last thing, Bogues. For the next 5 years, the MVP will be locked up by non-American born players in the next 5 years.
Ooh, it's a tough one. So the names we're working with is Giannis, Jokic, Luka. Who else am I missing? Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Besides maybe Joel Embiid, but I don't know if he was born in the United States or not. I know he went to school here.
Ooh, that changes things. Still got KD. Not 5 years. If you would have said 3, I would say fact. But 5 years is a long time. I will say fake news on that one.
I'm going to say fact. The reason being, the only guy that really has a chance in the next year or two off the bat would be Durant. But he is 32.
Steph?
So, I don't know if he's going to play less games and not be factored in. MVP is a little bit different than winning a championship and keeping your team going forward, especially with, players freaking out about injuries and resting and things. I don't think Zion will be good enough to win an MVP. I think I got Booker at 10 right now in the league, top 10, probably the 10th best player. He might have a chance.
Steph Curry, Dame Lillard.
Steph Curry and Dame Lillard will have chances for sure. But again, Steph's 33. And Dame could put up a lot of points and put up a lot of stats. He could be an MVP. But I think Luka, Jokic, and Giannis, especially where people, if Giannis was going to take a hit in his sort of ranking and things, he would have probably taken a little bit of a hit now in the last year, before the championship. Now that everybody's all over him as far as being the greatest thing since sliced bread, I think he's going to be in the mix a long time. I think Jokic will be in the mix. Luka and Embiid, if he could stay healthy enough, he could be in the conversation as well. So I say that's fact.
Fair enough. 5 years, a long time though, pro. So we'll watch that space.
No doubt.
All right, Q&As. Finally got a chance to get through some of these. Appreciate everyone sending them in every week. But when we have a guest like Gaze and it goes overtime, we just don't have time. Otherwise, it'll be an 8-hour podcast and Pro would get a little cranky. So we'll start with the first question. Hi, Andrew and Pro, loving all the podcast. Bogues, now that the Olympics are underway, how does retirement feel? Do you have any regrets calling the end to your career? I'm asking because part of me wishes we could have seen you line up in the green and gold again. Second part of the question, you've always seemed to find your groove. You've seemed to find your groove in retirement, but that isn't always the case for NBA players. Do you think the NBA is doing enough to support athletes post-career? Cheers, Tom Smith from Kangaroo Island. To be honest with you, it's really hit home that I'm retired this last week or two watching the Boomers and not being part of it. So it's definitely hurt a little bit mentally at times, but then, knowing the body's not hurting every day and I can kind of go about my daily business is the bonus. But I'm not going to lie, this last couple of weeks has been tough. Commentating, it's probably going to be even more tough mentally once it's all done. Not being there, even for the wins and the losses. Losses, you think, shit, maybe I could have been there and helped for 5 minutes a game. Wins, you're like, damn, I feel like I'm FOMOing, I'm missing out. So definitely tough to watch. But that's part of what every athlete goes through. As far as retirement, I try to just keep busy somewhat when I was done, and that was hard with lockdowns, and there were days where it's tough. I'm not going to lie. There's days you miss the camaraderie and the banter and talking shit with guys, and everything comes about team sports at a high level. You definitely miss that, and that's not something that you can just stick a Band-Aid over and move on. So it's something you got to adapt to. Podcasting's been a big part of that, talking with everyone out there and shooting the shit about basketball has been really fun. But the kids have taken up a lot of time, so being able to be at home and really get involved with their lives much more than you usually can when you got a full-time job has been a blessing that at times is hard as shit. Like, I commend stay-at-home mums. I really don't know how they don't just rip their hair out on a daily basis at times. These little bastards just causing problems. But they do a fantastic job, so I've done all that. But as far as second part of your question, do the NBA do enough to support? The NBPA, the Players Association, and the NBA, they try to prepare you as best they can. Like, they try to basically say, what are your plans for post-sport? Now, when I heard that as a 20, 21-year-old draft pick, I was like, get the hell out of my house. All I'm thinking about is basketball. But you kind of get it. They try to prepare you as much as they can. That's just a part of their programs because they understand that, player going bankrupt that made $100 million is not good for the NBA's brand. It's not good for anyone. That's not a positive story. So they've tried to help players through that. But it's hard. You go from routine based to wake up at 9, training at 11, get your lifting, get your mealing. Everything's you as an athlete. When you retire, it's no longer about you. It's like, hey, go change that nappy. Hey, we're doing this, or hey, we're doing that. So it's an adjustment. And I'm not going to lie, there were days I struggled with it. There were days I was probably on my wife and kids too much just because I was used to being in that team environment where you nitpicking, like, hey, how do we score on this play? How do we stop this play? So then you kind of take it out on your kids and wife at times. And thankfully, my wife understood that at times, but that's just something you got to deal with. And I mean, the NBA does as best they can, but if you don't have, you got to find some sort of passion at times away from the court that you can transition into and probably take that up a little bit more full time when you retire, Pro. I don't know if you have any advice around retirement for players.
No, I mean, there's a lot of bad stories of players who retire. There's a lot of bad stories because they never took the time to learn about financial responsibility. And I understand that when you're young, you don't want to hear it. And then a lot of times when it's presented, it's presented in a condescending way to these players, especially when they're young. I think they really need to have a serious discussion with players throughout their career about fiscal responsibility. I think with this NIL thing in college, I think that they have to hit them early about financial and fiscal responsibility, how to balance the checkbook, how do you set your budget, these war stories about players who, spend all their money, or their livelihood for 15 years was, let's be honest, was like chasing women at night, playing, drinking, going out, spending all this money because they always had money coming in. And then when they go from when they go from the rookie contract to making 18, 20, even though it's a lot of money you don't think they're going to piss through. And then you're like, last few years, you make a mid-level exception. So you go from like 19, 20 to like 7, 8, 9. And then you go minimum 2, 8. And now you're out of the league, or you're an assistant coach making 80 to 100. And then you're still blowing the money like you're making 18 million. And now you're out. It's going to be a really cold, dark life going forward. I think the NBA really has to do a better job with. They do a great job with like giving them opportunities and things, but I've seen those presentations they give players. They're not great. I think they got to really take a serious tone to it. First of all, give them the fucking, like, the only way NBA players, in my opinion, Bogues, look, I'm a fucking mutant, right? Like, I'm a fucking ugly motherfucker, 500 fucking pounds, never played. But one thing I can do is get through the players, because I usually give them the war stories and the horror stories about players who didn't make it, like on the court. But on the off the court stuff, you got to give them the stories of the Antoine Walkers, of the Vin Bakers, of the, the players who ran, Allen Iverson, the guys who ran through their shit. And like, even worse than that, the guys that are homeless, that weren't NBA All-Stars, the guys that played 3 years but ran through all their fucking money. I think they need that fiscal responsibility, and then how to get a job, how to, do the day-to-day. And I think they need to do a better job of that, because I've seen what they do with players. I've sat in those rookie meetings in Vegas, and they're a fucking joke, to be honest with you.
At the same time, Pro, there's a personal responsibility that also comes, and I'm not going to lie, you always, when you're in those meetings, you're like, oh, it's not going to be me. And the biggest problem isn't so much retirement, it's the financial side of it, is because you can enjoy that life of luxury spending and new car every other month and, different houses in different cities while you're making 15, 20 million, even 10 million, even 8 million, right? But you got to figure out that that's going to dry, that water faucet's going to turn off, right? And then you got to figure out, okay, I need some passive investments. So what do I need to live right now outside of spending like an idiot on luxury goods? Okay, I need this much. So then you need to invest to give yourself a return. It's basic. The financial advice is hard. I emphasize, guys go and do a class, which I did online, around personal wealth management, because it changed the world for me about figuring things out. And that's what they should be doing. It shouldn't be, a lot of those meetings are done after training sessions. You've trained for 2 hours, you've lifted weights, you just want to get home. Guys aren't paying attention. They're on their phones, they're asleep. And the NBA PA and the NBA at times do them to tick a box. Oh, we did it. You didn't listen, but they're not the best environments for them. And then you've got the rookie initiations. It's an absolute shit show. They've got you cooped up in a seminar room, or they did. I don't know if it's still the same. When I went, and it was 8 hours, 8 hours of lectures from all these different speakers. And after like an hour and 15 minutes of it, you're like, what is this shit? Like, it just doesn't, it's not going to sink in. Guys aren't going to take it in. So the financial literacy one's a big one. You need to teach financial literacy and how to understand even what your financial people are telling you in a meeting. And that's what's missed. And I think a lot of it spirals when guys lose money and don't have that sense of belonging to a community or a group or a hobby or a passion that the NBA was for him. You now feel like you're on the outer, and that's just the unfortunate reality. It's a hard thing to do. Everyone goes through it in different forms of life if you've changed jobs or changed professions. But the drop from being a star athlete on the world stage, big money, to you're an everyday Joe now. It's some guys can't accept that neither, and it's a mental challenge that everyone has to go through. That's a professional athlete.
Yeah, instead of 28 fucking player development guys, why not hire 21 player development guys and hire about 6 more people? Hanging with your young players, as far as showing them and regularly meeting with them and talking to them about that, because like 99% of the players that play in the league ain't going to play for one team, and most of the careers are going to last 5 years or less. So they need to really understand it when they get in the league, and because it could be very much rewarding. I think Rick Carlisle told a story about Nazi Muhammad, about like most of his career, he just spent his like Nike check or something like that, where he put himself on a budget and he put all his put all his money away. And then you hear about those stories about guys like that have plenty of money now. They invested it well. They didn't like blow, they didn't blow their money on stuff. Jamal Mashburn's like that. So I mean, like, those guys should be speaking to the league about what players, about what they did and things. I mean, I guess it's easy for me to say they should be doing this, should be doing that. But I think you're right. I think the financial literacy.
You just get caught up in, there's $1 million being deposited in your account every 2 weeks, and it's never going to run dry. It runs dry, especially when you own multiple properties around the world, land tax and all that. And I think the agents play a big part in this too. There's these agents that are taking 3, 4, 5% of playing contracts and 20% of marketing. They can almost employ someone to help you with that. Not a financial advisor, not someone that's telling you put your money here. Someone that's actually teaching you how to pay your bills, how to invest, how to log into your stock exchange online to check your stocks and how it all works, and dumb it down. And I got to a point where I wasn't scared to ask questions, no matter how stupid they sounded. I mean, I'm paying these people, financial advisors. I'm gonna pick their brain on things, and that's where it's the agents, in my opinion. It's they love taking that check and they love taking that percentage, but their player falls out of the league and they never hear from them again. But how about investing back into your players as well? So anyway, thanks. We can go on that forever. Thanks for that question, Tom. Next one. Hey, gents, love the gaze chat. Bogues, in your college career, you were a good outside shooter, hitting threes, dominating. Were you told not to do it in the NBA? Do you still do it in practice, just not the games? And if you came into the league now, would you have an even better career being an athletic Brook Lopez type big, dunking and hitting threes? 2, what's the difference between playing in the NBA compared to the Olympics? Like, what are the games village like? And pro, probably a question that's going to be very tough. You can only eat one meal for the rest of your life. Greek seafood or McDonald's? Love the work, fellas. That's from Ray Romanus. And I will start off. You can think about your food, pro. Doubt it takes you too long. But yeah, look, I wasn't a heavy three-point shooter, mass three-point shooter. I was hitting just under 1 a game in college and at like a low 30s clip. So shot a lot early on in my junior career. And I guess getting to the NBA, the line was a bit further out. I kind of got drafted in the era of bigs don't go out on the perimeter. They stay on the block and just never really kind of worked on it as much as I probably should have, thinking that this isn't a part of my game where I'm going to be effective on the floor, especially, in the mid-2000s. It was all your 4 and 5 men were generally on the block, playing inside out, high low. That's just the style of game. And then, as Pro said, the game started to change probably 5-6 years ago, and those kind of big men, factored out. But thankfully, I could still rebound and block shots. But internationally, I shot them a fair bit. I think in the 08 Olympics, this might shock you, but the 08 Olympics, I believe I was top 5 for 3-point field goal percentage at a decent clip. I think I hit 5 or 6 for the tournament. So have had some success shooting it. And then the arm injury, I'm not going to say that was the only factor because I wasn't shooting them a lot in the NBA. But once that all went out the window, my jumper from outside the paint just mentally and physically went out the window, and just something I had to adjust with. So the difference between NBA and the Olympics and the village and all that is it's a month straight commitment. So you're not going home. You don't have time with your family. You just basically feel like you're on the road for the whole time as every other country, and you just got to dig in and really give it a good crack. But as we mentioned last week, the good thing about international is it's much more team orientated. There's no superstar calls. It's probably a bit more physical, to be honest with you. No defensive 3 seconds. So a little bit of an adjustment when you go from NBA to FIBA and vice versa. But for the most part, they both have their pros and cons. And it was obviously a blessing to be able to go to 3 Olympics myself. Pro, what do you got food-wise?
Man, that's a tough one. Actually, it's not that tough. Greek seafood for sure. Although if McDonald's could come up with a fillet of Greek fish instead of just a fillet of fish, I'll be down for that. But believe it or not, I'm not a huge McDonald's guy. I'm a huge guy that likes McDonald's, but I love their breakfast. I haven't really eaten at a McDonald's. If it wasn't a breakfast deal, I really haven't eaten at McDonald's in about 5 or 6 years, if you want to believe that or not. But as much as I like to talk shit about eating at McDonald's all the time and stuff, but I love the Greek seafood. You can't beat, man. Especially when you're on the water. It's something pretty big time. But back in the day, I put some fucking damage into that shit. And I worked at McDonald's, Bogues. It's one of my first jobs I've ever had. And ironically enough, that McDonald's ain't in business anymore, so it could have a correlation.
Yeah, and you didn't get paid in cash.
No, it just paid me in cheeseburgers. I was like Wimpy from fucking Popeye.
Yeah, you can't beat the Greek seafood with olive oil. Next question, is that it for Ben and the Sixers? Surely they show one more year of faith and trust the process. Feel bad for him and always defended him, but not after he bailed on the Boomers. Everyone is hating on Ben, and if there was anything that would have helped his cause, it would have been to get the Aussies behind him. Love you, Bogues. That's from Josh Leifner. Totally agree with you. And we mentioned this. I think him being part of that Boomers program after the horrendous finish to the season that he had, it would have done wonders for him. You look at what Matisse Thybulle's doing. Would have envisioned a similar role for Ben at that point guard spot of just coming in, and his athleticism alone in the FIBA game would be huge. But yeah, just something that he's got to get through. I think him and the Sixers are done, I believe, Pro. I don't know what you're hearing. I think he's going to be moved. I think it's just a matter of not if, but when. And I think we'll probably see a change of jersey for Ben in the future.
Yeah, the way Daryl Morey works, too, I mean, he's a wheel and dealer. He loves making moves and trades and transactions. And especially it'll have been a little bit tougher to deal Ben before the playoffs. But then what happened in the playoffs, it just sort of, gives it a whole green light to deal him. I think that you're going to see you're going to see him dealt within the next few months, if not much sooner than that. I mean, what they could have done for him earlier is actually like stop the bullshit. Make him work with a shooting coach, their shooting coach, monitor him a little bit more, hold him accountable a little bit more about doing some of the things that he needed to do. Don't just entrust trainers to work with him in the summer. That doesn't work for your team. When you have an asset that's worth that much money, it's not like he's like the ninth man, which like if a ninth man wants to go and work out with somebody in LA, great, fine. There's a little bit less expectations on him, on a player like that, than there is on Ben Simmons. And I think they could have done a little bit better job, earlier in his career, first year, second year, of really like tightening the reins on what he could do, because they really needed to attack some things that they failed to do. And with Daryl Morey, he's going to deal them. Portland, Sacramento, one of those deals, you'll probably see something, happen in the next few months.
Oh, watch that space. Saw Minnesota was in there as well. They're probably in every trade rumor there
Minnesota,
is.
Yeah.
So see how that goes. Yeah. All right. Hello, Bogues and Pro. Can I get your thoughts on load management? Should the performance trainer have veto over the head coach, or should the coach have the final say? And do you have any say regarding the matter now that you're part owner of a club? Thanks. That's from Jacob K. It's an interesting one that a lot of people talk about, a lot of debates back and forth. The good clubs, it's a collab. It's a collab. You have to work together. There's pros and cons of both sides of it. Load management becomes important if you're a playoff team that wants to go deep and you want healthy horses at the end of the day. I've seen coaches that play their guys 40, 45 minutes a night throughout a regular season, get to the playoffs, they ride them hard and they just burn out. They're just absolutely spent physically, or they get an injury. And I've seen it on the other side where coaches kind of, really don't want to play guys. We see it with the Clippers a little bit, and I've touched on it, where they just don't get enough rhythm and time together. So I think it's a case-by-case basis. You want all your players healthy towards the end of the season, so that I think somewhat the load management is very important. But, if it's an important all-win game, and you've got a guy that's on a 30-minute limit and it's hitting his limit with 4 minutes left in the game, what do you do? That's the conundrum. That's the conundrum you have, and everything's negotiable. So what I would do if I was a head coach, and I've had this discussion, is if a trainer said to me, this guy's got 30 minutes and there's 4 minutes left in a close game, a must-win game for us for whatever reason, I'd play him that extra 4 minutes and then be like, look, we're gonna make this up during the week for his load. So, instead of just Monday off, we'll go Monday off for him, give him Tuesday, we'll give him a lighter session, half the time that the group's doing, and then maybe another day off Wednesday. It's all negotiable, and you want to work together with your group. The teams that I've seen get in trouble with it is coaches that say, fuck you to the trainer, you don't know shit about basketball. My job's on the line as a coach. I'm playing this guy as much as I want. And the flip side of a load management person saying every injury is the coach's fault. So it's neither one extreme or the other. You have to work together to be successful, and it's a part of our game today is managing load and injuries. And look, there is some correlation with studies. Guys doing their Achilles and their knee and whatnot. You can't stop high impact injuries, but you can stop those soft tissue type tweaks or an Achilles tweak. The data usually for those guys has some warning signs before they do them, Pro. I don't know how you feel about all this, but I'm sure you'll give us your opinion.
No, that's why I get the big bucks here, Bogues. But yeah, I think that you have to listen to your trainer. And first, in my career in Dallas, I always check with our trainer, Casey Smith, or whatever he needed, like as far as minutes for players, as far as their workouts, their workload. They're the ones that are they've got the degrees in that, they've got the expertise in it. I do think that there needs to be, just like anything else, things need to be tweaked. You got to be communicated. And just like you said, like if somebody has a minute load of 30 minutes, that's their max, and someone's coming back from an injury or they're an older player or whatever it is. And then it's a close game and you're like, look, give me a few, let me know what the most minutes this guy can play without really putting himself in harm's way. And it's got to be a little bit more over the minutes that you told me. But I'll make it up to you next game. I'll sit him, whatever we need to do. But there are certain situations where they need to play. They need to play together. I think, like you said, I think the Clippers, it really screwed them. All these guys run load management deals. They never really played together. And I think it really hurt them in the playoffs, especially getting Rondo late and playing together and all that stuff. So I do think that there needs to be communication. I think there needs to be communication with the organization saying, look, we're going to try to keep to this plan as much as possible. But there are going to be times where he's going to have to go over. We're not going to disrespect the trainer and say, we're going to play him 45 minutes. Fuck you. You don't know what you're doing. But like if there's a 30-minute cap and he can get to 37, can he get to 37 if we really need him to do so? I just think it needs to be communicated. I think it's too many times, Bogues, the coaching staff is against the trainer's against the coaching staff. They both say either side don't know what the fuck they're doing on their own side, and they need to say, you know what, look, I'm on your side here. We're going to defer to you as the trainer, as the doctor. We know you know your stuff, but there are some times where we need to play this guy on a must-win game situation. They don't come up that often. It's not like there's 82 must-win games, but there's got to be some leeway with this. Sometimes I think that teams mess themselves up by, just going to that load management and, following it like the Bible all the time,
Yeah, I think it needs to be a mix. I think it needs to be the good teams I've been on. It's an open conversation with the Kings. What we implemented, at least when Will Weaver was here, even when Adam Ford was there, was Monday morning meetings after the weekend's games, and we discuss, hey, this guy was banged up, this guy's back's messed up. We're going to tweak him back on Tuesday, get him back in the mix on Wednesday, then a lighter day on Thursday. You have those discussions, and you have to have them on a daily basis. It takes 10 or 15 minutes every week. You set the load for the week, and you try to stick to it. Now, if you go over 10 minutes on a practice, it's not the end of the world. But if you're going over an hour every other day, then that's going to be an issue. And this is where the blame game also rears its ugly head, Pro, that we spoke about earlier, is that I've been on teams where I was on a team where an athlete had hyperextended his knee, was going to be out a while. Trainers, did some soft tissue stuff, and they're like, go do some strengthening in the weight room. And they walk in there 15 minutes later, and the strength trainer's got this guy doing sled pushes, like the big sled loaded with weights, and you're pushing it. And they're like, what are you doing? Like, we needed just some light, band type strengthening for his quad. Like, he shouldn't be pushing this. His knee's not ready for that. The guy was delayed an extra 3 or 4 weeks from coming back. I've been on a team where there'd be an injury protocol, 6 to 8 weeks out. They'd send him in the weight room, and then the guy would either re-injure himself. The trainers would blame the strength coach and say, oh, he was pushing him too hard too early. And the strength coach would say, well, the treatments weren't right. So this is the other thing that happens, and just a nasty part of the industry where there happens to be an injury. It's just going to be that Spider-Man meme of the fingers pointing at the Spider-Mans. That's exactly what happens in the NBA with coaches and all that. So I think it needs to be a balance. Totally agree with you, Pro. It needs to be a hybrid, and it can't be one brush stroke to every painting. It has to be, every guy's different. A guy might be like myself towards the end of the career, 35. We know he's got back issues. We got to tweak things a little bit more and keep an eye on this guy more. But a 19-year-old spry chicken from college, we keep an eye on him, but not as much as the old dog that's probably struggling. So it needs to be a case-by-case basis, and the good teams figure that out. The bad teams don't, and there's, it is an important part of success these days. If you can have a healthy team, as we've seen in the playoffs, if you can have a healthy team towards the end of it, you put yourself in a much better situation to win. Last question. Absolutely love the pod and schedule my day around listening. Why did you choose the Sydney Kings over Melbourne United or any other NBL side when you returned, especially being a Melburnian? That's from Steve. That is an interesting question. I've touched on this before. I was all into coming to Melbourne United negotiations with the then GM Vince Crivelli, who's now working in the NBL. He was a junior coach of mine. I had good and bad dealings with him as a junior, and we went back and forth on a negotiation. And the NBL has a rule around player image rights, Pro. So they basically own your image rights when you sign in the league. And I said, look, I'm not trying to pump myself up, but I think my brand is my individual brand is almost as big, if not bigger than the NBL's in certain markets in Australia as far as marketing. And I can make, some of my marketing deals have probably been up there with the equivalent of what my NBL contract was. So I said, it's not fair to me to give up all this marketing to come back and sign a professional deal. So they pushed back on that. We went back and forward, and then I said, look, I get it. The league, for instance, is sponsored by Hungry Jack's or, as you know, Burger King. I said, I get it. If I go out and get a deal with McDonald's, it doesn't look good for the league if I'm one of the faces of the league. So I gave them a couple of categories. I said, look, I'll give you fast food because they're one of the main sponsors. I'll give you another category that you can esh out that I can't compete in. And then the rest is the rest of the categories. I'll bring you a deal that I have and say, look, I've got a deal with Company X. If your league sponsor can match that, then we negotiate, right? So it was around that. Anyway, negotiations back and forth. There was a few sticking points. So then I'd met with Vince one last time. I still remember it on I think it was a Friday night in Melbourne, met with him locally at a restaurant. We had the discussion. I said, look, I'm not doing this and I'm not agreeing to this. We had agreed verbally to some circumstances, all got agreed, thought the deal was done. That night or the next morning got the contract, and it was not what we agreed verbally. There was still some cheeky little tweaks in there that they put in. And after going back, and this was an ongoing negotiation for a couple of weeks, after going back and forth and then actually sitting with him and looking him in the eyes and shaking his hand and coming to agreement on a deal and then having a small tweak again, said, you know what, I'm done dealing with you. I don't do business that way. We agreed man to man, shook hands. And I basically called the Sydney Kings and said, this is the deal I want. This is what I had done with Melbourne, bar a few things they put in that I didn't agree with. If you can do this, I sign with you today. And to the Kings ownership credit, they flew their GM, Jeff Van Groningen, out immediately. I had the deal signed immediately. We went back and forth on a few little specifics, fine print, and had the deal done. And that was it. And that's basically why I signed with Melbourne United. That's the blunt truth. And now I know Vince has been on record saying that's not the truth. I have no reason to lie in this mix. I have no reason to tell fibs. I wanted to sign in Melbourne, in my hometown. But the Sydney Kings thing ended up being a blessing in disguise. I met Paul Smith, who's now the majority owner. I've enjoyed working with him, enjoyed working with the club, and it's been a fantastic opportunity to be, at arm's length with the market in Sydney, and I really enjoyed my time there with the fans and the people of Sydney. So that's basically the long story short, and that's why I didn't sign with Melbourne United, bro.
Wow. I mean, there's always a story inside of a story with that stuff, and it's funny, like when you're a casual fan or a follower of the league and you just sort of, you might have your sort of ideas of why you would have signed with one team over another. You don't really know the inner workings of what goes on behind closed doors. It's a pretty cool story.
Yeah, and it wasn't even financial though. Like, it wasn't really that much about money. It was about me, like, just a few small little tweaks that weren't even that big of a deal, but the way I do business, if you look me in the eyes and we shake hands on something, it better be in print the same way we shake hands on it. You know what I mean? I don't like people and respect people. I just don't trust. You lose my trust instantly. If then you've put something in print that's completely opposite what I discussed, I'm like, I can't do business with you again. I just can't. Now, whether it was a printing mistake by the secretary or whatever, I can't do business with you, and that's the way I work. All right, that wraps up episode 30 of Rogue Bogues, the basketball series. Hope you enjoyed. Thanks for sending your Q&As. Once again, thanks for supporting us. We are continuing to grow, getting into double-digit 1,000 numbers now on a weekly basis, which is nice to see. So share this far and wide. YouTube has our videos as well. We do a few nice little edits, like our Boomers chat on YouTube, on the YouTube page. But Rogue Bogues on all your social media forums, at Hoop Consultants is pro. If you need some hoop consulting work from an NBA pro anywhere in the world, he's happy to help. Reach out to him, and we will see you next week, bro.
Bogues, looking forward to it, brother. Hopefully Gaze shows his face again. I'd like to go one-on-one with that motherfucker again.
Shows his face via audio recording, pro.
I'm not the smartest fucking guy in the world, let's be honest.
See you next week.
Later.